Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, May 25th. I'm Kelly McNicholas Curry, the board chair. Also in the room with me is Vice Chair Patty Clapper, County Manager John Peacock, and Andrew and Skylar helping us on the Zoom. Thanks, guys. And joining us from home are other commissioners Steve Child and Francie Jacober. Greg Postman has taken some time off with his family, and I don't believe he is able to call in with us today. So before we get started, I want to check in with the board on our agenda because the Housing Authority APSHA has scheduled a special meeting at 2 o'clock this afternoon to discuss and I assume approve the settlement with the Mulcahy's. And so in order to have a quorum at that board, either Francie or I need to join. So I'm not sure what's the best here. I think one of us could take it, Francie could take it, I could take it, or we could rearrange our schedule to have a short break. I think that meeting will take about 15 minutes. So I want to check in with the board and John to see on your prerogatives for that.
Yeah, and Kelly, I think I could cut 15 minutes off of the COVID update if the board wanted to take a break at that time and make that happen.
Okay. Does that work with
Yeah,
board
that
members?
works.
So we will schedule a break from 2 to 2:15. And Francie and I can jump off and join APSHA and then come back and we'll pick up on our COVID update.
We can always continue, John, if you don't get through your 4 hours of presentation, we can tag it out at the end.
Only 3.5 today,
Okay.
Patty. Yeah.
Then we'll be good, we'll be good, John.
Does that sound good, Francie and Steve?
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good to me.
All right. Thanks for everybody's flexibility. It was hard to schedule that meeting with a quick turnaround for APSHA. So I'm just going to write a note here. Okay, so with that, our first item of discussion is expanding the opening of county facilities in our process of coming out of the pandemic, which feels really good. So I'll turn it over to you, John Peacock.
All right, thanks, Kelly. And I think Ann is going to share her screen here. And so what we want to talk to the board about today and get your consent to move forward with is the next phase of reopening of our facilities. This is not yet a full reopening. The board may recall we had set several phases. And so we're going to go through those today just so you remember where we've been and the phases left to go. Can you go back to that cartoon, Ann? Because I always have to have a cartoon. So a little bit of what's defining our phases right now is Francie, you weren't here for this part, but when we were designing this building, one of the discussions we had was, how do we build for the future? And at that time, we had a lot of discussion about what the workplace of the future was going to look like. And we talked about digital transformation was going to come, that the workplace of the future was going to look more like a login and a laptop than necessarily bricks and mortar, but that we were clearly years away from that happening. And so we, as we projected out our facility needs, we really, reduced the square footage. We've been building for more flexible spaces that can be converted. One of the things we'll be talking about today is part of this phasing plan that we're going to be presenting to you not only deals with COVID and how we went into remote work and that sort of thing, but as we come out of it, what have we learned and what can we make permanent? And that's just going to take a little bit more time for us to figure out, which is really getting to our last phase that we'll talk about. So COVID caused us to make some very, very quick changes. We've been learning a lot about those over the last year, and they'll help inform how we go forward. So just a reminder of where we've been. Phase one of our building closures started March and went through May of last year. All county buildings were closed to the public except for the airport and landfill. And the vast majority of employees, literally almost overnight, transitioned to working online or from home. Library opened a curbside on May 9th, and then each building completed and implemented a building safety plan in preparation for stage 2. Can you go ahead and advance the slide there? Stage 2 began just about a little less than a year ago, June 8th, 2020. Again, all buildings remain closed to the public except for the airport and landfill. Public Works and Health and Human Services opened up on a limited basis. The majority of employees continued to work remotely, frankly, as did the board and our elected officials. But we did put a building entry protocol in place, and there was some limited use of the buildings. Go ahead and advance. So that brought us to phase 3, which started July 6th of last year and has really brought us to where we are today. In phase 3, we opened the lower floor of the Sheriff and Administration Building for public access to the Clerk and Recorder's Office and Sheriff's Department on a scheduled basis. This was not walk-in, but it was on schedule by appointment only. The second and third floors have been closed to the general public. There have been limited opportunities for employees to come in and work. We've tried to keep the densities in the building really, really low. And the reason for that is the county, of course, provides services that you can't get anywhere else. Think law enforcement or what the Clerk and Recorder's Office does and Road and Bridge, just a number of services that we provide that are unique and can't be done remotely. And so we're really limiting densities in order to protect our ability to continue providing those essential services, as well as to protect public health. The library opened on May 24th of this year, and now with the upcoming public health order change on the 28th, we're looking at moving to phase 4 of our reopening on June 1st. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ann Driggers, who has been working with the organization on these reopening plans.
Thank you, John. Yes, so John touched the internal services team, which includes facilities, HR risk, administration, finance, and communications, to come up with a framework that would allow us to expand our opening of county facilities. And I wanted to recognize the team that's worked on this. We've had many meetings over the last 6 weeks hammering it out. And then we presented to the E-team, all the department heads and directors for their feedback. So this is very much a collaborative effort. But I wanted to start off with basically an overview, and then we'll move more into the details of each piece of this phase. So phase 4 is just the next step in a phased approach in resuming on-site business operations. And we're still operating under a temporary emergency remote hybrid work policy. However, beginning June 1, we're going to expand that opening so that all county facilities will actually be open to the public. And throughout the summer, we'll increase densities of staff present in the office. Our goals of this next phase are, first of all, to reintroduce public to the county facilities across all county facilities. As I just mentioned, increasing the density of staff working in person in the office. However, it's important that we continue to remain safe, both our employees and the public. And our employee health and well-being is also very important to us. Another goal of this phase is really to establish a structural balance between remote and in-person work, recognizing that in the future, our workplace and the way we do work may look a bit different from what it was like before COVID-19. And in that sense, we're going to test various scenarios for the design of the future workplace so we can inform ourselves on what future policies might look like and what the workplace will look like. And we have produced what we're calling a COVID-19 playbook, basically a list of best practices and guidance resources and so on for the expanded opening. There are many questions floating out there, how this is going to happen and what the rules and etiquette are. And so we felt it was important to provide some guidance as best we could to our employees. And then the final part of phase 4 is to really determine what phase 5 is going to look like. And that essentially is a return to pre-COVID status in the workplace. In other words, in-person work if needed at all times. But that's going to need new policies, perhaps relocation of workers, and so on. A lot to go through over the summer with that. Any questions on this slide before I move on into the details?
I'm good.
I don't
Thank
see
you.
any end. Thank you.
So I just briefly mentioned phase 5. That is kind of the end goal of all of this, for us to return to pre-COVID-19 status. The date has yet to be set on when that would take place. But in short, we would remove any emergency temporary remote worker policies and, as I said, return to the pre-COVID status in the workplace. We have a lot of work to do. This will happen over the summer. We'll be developing and finalizing policies for future hybrid remote work options. All the time we'll be focusing on delivering high quality services to the public. That's going to be paramount. Maintaining the important physical, emotional, and personal connections within the workplace and greater community. I think that's something that we've all missed over the last year plus by working remotely. And the productivity and well-being of staff is also important. And I meant to put this in a separate bullet point, but environmental impacts, as I think you're going to hear later from community development, the environmental impacts or lack thereof or savings that have been made from us not commuting into the office and the change in our work habits has been quite significant. So there's a lot of research to be done and considerations while we develop how we move into phase 5. And then when that's been done, we'll be able to determine what the technology and facility needs are for the design of our future workplace. So I just wanted to set the stage that's ultimately our end goal, but right now we're just concerned with phase 4 as what's going to happen next week, essentially. Any questions?
All right, keep going. Thank you.
Thank you. So we developed a framework for phase 4, essentially, and phase 5. And the orange/yellow is kind of where we're at right now. The blue is what we're proposing we move to on June 1 next week. That's what we're calling expanded opening. And then phase 5, date to be determined, full opening. So I'll just focus on the phase 4 for right now, but public facilities will all be open to the public. There will be some appointments for departments, and we'll go into more detail on that in a minute. And then social distancing and masks will be required as per public health guidance. Obviously, that's changing all the time. And so in terms of our framework, we would indicate that we would change as needed with the public health guidance of the time. In terms of staffing and remote work, in phase 4, some staff will continue to work remotely. Other staff will have a partial return to the office. There'll be scheduling to ensure that we have limited densities. And then we're also encouraging departments to have what we call collaboration days for teamwork. So for instance, in the finance department, Connie, Liz, and I, who spend quite a bit of time together, we'll plan on being in the office on Wednesdays and Thursdays each week so that we can really enhance our collaboration and teamwork. In terms of screening and social distancing and face coverings for staff, we have been using the daily health log since last summer, and it's still in place. We are proposing that be removed, and as staff come into the office, before they come into the office, they self-screen for symptoms before entering the workplace or even before leaving home. Excuse me, that's my dog. It's quite tight. So we're going to remove the health log, and just like if any employees were ill in the past or had symptoms of anything, then we're going to ask them that they stay at home. So employees will have that responsibility. And the masks are as required by the public health order. In terms of public and board meetings, I believe that there's various groups kind of working on hammering out the details on that, but essentially we're still anticipating a hybrid in-person and remote participation. And obviously for people in the buildings, in meetings, they will need to abide by the public health orders for social distancing and masks if required. And then other staff meetings are essentially going to be the same way. We are encouraging in the summer months in-person meetings to be outside. We've always had that kind of nice to be outside walking meetings, and we're just encouraging staff to continue to do the same in the summer. In terms of travel for work, we did suspend basically all work travel to conferences, training, and so forth in phase 3. As we move into the summer, there are conferences now being in person, and CCI being one, I believe, in the next couple of weeks. And so we're going to suggest that in-state business travel can resume to locations that allow it, and that staff must adhere to the local public health orders and CDC guidelines as it's required for their travel. And then just a reminder, in the terms of the policies, we will continue to operate under emergency temporary policies as we work over the summer to develop exactly what those new policies are.
I have
Any questions
a question.
on the?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Francie, then Steve.
I'm just wondering about the mask mandate when everybody is vaccinated, because I thought the Board of Health had said that if 80% of people are vaccinated and the 20% could show that they're negative, that we could have no masks inside. So I'm wondering about the board meetings having to be masked when everybody is vaccinated.
Question of the day.
Yeah, so, and Francie, I know this is causing a lot of conversation in the community also. I think the challenge with that is not the board itself, but it's if members of the public are availing themselves to be in the boardroom to make public comment or for presentations or what have you. We do not anticipate putting a vaccine screening protocol into place, partly because of the sensitive nature of the health data that we would have to maintain. So it's a little bit like restaurants or such, where we're still requiring masks indoors as you're traveling through to get to your table. But for ticketed events where they've put into place a process where they're checking for and storing that data in a HIPAA compliant manner, I do think that these mask orders are probably going to change a lot over the summer, and that this will, to Ann's point about following the public health order of the time, that we'll see this evolve as vaccine rates increase in the state and nation. I'll have some data for you. I probably should have reversed the order of these to give the COVID update first with the data and then talk about the building reopening, but we'll talk a little bit about that in the next presentation. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, it answers it if the public's there. What if the public is not there?
Yeah, if the public is not there and with 100% vaccination, you can meet without a mask and if we confirm that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Steve?
So I'm a little confused on the public participation. I presume that would be hybrid with some people could be there in person, and whether they have to be wearing a mask if they've been vaccinated. I'm confused on that, or I think maybe a lot of them would just wear a mask as a matter of practice. But then I presume that there will still be remote participation by the public, in which case when we're asking for public comment, Kelly then would have to ask the people in the room and then go to the people on the call remotely. Is that correct?
Yeah, so two questions in there. First on masks, since we are not anticipating on screening people as to whether they have a vaccine or not, in those public settings like the boardroom, when we have public presence, Steve, we will be requiring masks until that changes under these guidelines. As far as the hybrid for the public, yeah, we probably should have parentheses in here. Kelly's job gets more difficult to a certain degree, but we would anticipate allowing people to come in either electronically or in person. I will say that our intent is to reduce the densities in the room. You don't need to have the full 6-foot distancing necessarily with masks. We are going to book the Roaring Fork room, which we can simulcast to for overflow. And then if we are anticipating a meeting that has high public interest, we will likely use a reservation system for in-person comments and encourage folks to participate electronically. There are people in our community, in the world, who are unable to get a vaccine just because of medical reasons or what have you. And we're still trying to accommodate access for all those folks, whether it be in person or electronic. And so that is a consideration, Kelly. It does get a little bit more difficult for you.
I don't think it gets any more difficult than having presenters come into the room.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I appreciate that people can have a choice. Maybe more people will participate.
And this may be one of those things we want to keep going forward, and having the virtual meeting opportunity for board members when they're traveling and the public.
So can I tag on to that?
Of course.
If Steve's done?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if a
Step
member
away.
of the public comes in and wants to go to the assessor's office, they need to wear a mask.
Correct.
Okay, we've already had people combative at the front door, just for a heads up, who
Yeah.
are, causing some commotion and scaring some staff members because they refuse to wear a mask. They don't understand the difference. So we need to somehow, and I don't know how we can get that education out there. It's because we are not doing X, therefore you have to do Y. To try and explain to them. But we're gonna have to have, since people are probably not gonna be wearing them in most settings in the community, we'll probably have to have more disposable masks available at the front.
Mhm.
But also, we need to figure out how we can keep a calm atmosphere in that front entry for staff. And even if they go to the assessor's office, people are still angry. So that's going to be a big hurdle and something I want to, see what we can do so that staff doesn't have to deal with that on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, that's a concern for
Yeah.
us, and obviously with the confusion, some people have been irritated, at the differences in rules as you change jurisdictions and those sorts of things. I do think a couple of things are going to happen. One, last week, obviously, there was a lot of change and a lot of confusion, and I think it's driving some of that frustration. I do think some of that dust is going to settle, and we're continuing to push out communications through various channels. So we're hoping we'll see that decrease, that dust kick-up decrease, and the number of folks who are surprised decrease. And then, like I said, I think as vaccinations increase, we will continue to see these rules change and probably relaxed going into the
And
summer.
there may be a system evolving that makes it, and with technology today, that makes it easier to track vaccination with people coming and going. And so it's not so difficult for the county to do it, like restaurants are going to be doing, ski company will be doing, the people who are staging events will be doing. So hopefully we'll just, we always keep an eye on that, so that would be a positive. But you're right about the confusion. I was at City Market in Elgin when the announcement came out, you don't have to wear a mask. In Aspen, people were calling me on the phone, why are people not wearing masks at City Market in Aspen? Carbondale, they had no masks. Elgin, nobody knew, and Aspen was supposed to be wearing masks and they weren't. So because the corporate made a decision, no mask, with the exception of following local guidelines, which they didn't include in the public service announcement in the grocery stores. So that was a perfect example of what happens between our valley because of the 3 different jurisdictions.
That's
So yeah, there was a lot of confusion in that short period of time. But, if in doubt, wear a mask. It's not that tough, so.
I have a question related to more of the staff side. I'm just curious about these collaboration days. Are those days where the full staff of that department will be present? What is that intended to look like?
Yeah, and so, and to Anne's point, oh, Anne, do you want to?
Yeah, I can just move to the next slide. Yeah, so, and let John take it from here. But yeah, I think every department has been entrusted to figure it out, how they want to do it. But John, do you want to add a little bit?
Yeah, so the expectation is, on these collaboration days that those are going to be days that everyone comes in. There will be some exceptions. There are some folks either because of their own medical reasons or because they are having there are going to be some folks who legitimately remain having concerns. We are going to provide some flexibility for those folks. But for example, in admin, we are also going to have collaboration days on Wednesdays and Thursdays where everyone comes in, assuming you guys say, yeah, let's move on here. And that was coordinated with other departments that we may need to have interaction with, especially going into budget season, for example. So notice ours line up with finances. Other departments will have different collaboration days, so the densities in the building overall still remain low, so that we don't have everyone in the building necessarily all at the same time, and that's part of the exercise that Anne's been going through with departments in terms of identifying how people are coming back in person and when, and then we'll show there's in a few more slides kind of a table that shows departments that are still going to remain by appointment to manage densities and those that are going to be walk-in going forward, but all will have access to that.
So John, for what you just said, is some people may not be comfortable. What do we do when it's just a matter of I don't want to come back to work?
Well, that's going to be a different discussion
Okay.
that we'll get to in phase 5. Again, we have vaccines that are authorized under emergency use authorization. We still have a number of folks that still have barriers, and we still have relatively high rates of transmission around us, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so I do think there's going to come a time when we move to phase 5 where that won't be an option, Patty, but we're not quite there
Okay.
yet.
Because,
without incurring
I'm in
some
the office a
liability.
lot,
Mhm.
and I see the staff that's been working very diligently, and they've been here, and a lot of them have been here because they have to be because of the jobs they perform for the public.
Mhm.
And there's, I'm kind of feeling a growing tension of, I'm coming in because I have to be here. The other members of staff are, have the choice to stay at home, or they're staying at home. And I would like to stay at home, but I can't, and they're feeling this, it's like we have a division created in what used to be this really tight family, this teamwork.
Mhm.
And I'm concerned about that, and I think that needs to be part of the explanation of why it's important for everybody to kind of take a part in this and a role in it. And people need to remember, pre-COVID, we let people pick a day or two that they could work from home. We encouraged that so they could, a lot of people felt they were more productive, or they had a project where they really needed to focus. And this really isn't much different as we move forward. And we're not asking you to come back 40 hours a week. We're just asking people to start sharing the responsibility of providing a public service to the public in person, and how we can work that out. So it's flexible, but it's fair across the board. I think fairness is a key word for the organization as a whole. So that for me is key to focusing on. I think this plan right now is answering a lot of my questions and allaying a lot of my concerns. I think it makes great sense. We have a ways to go. We'll have to see how it goes, and we're going to come up, I think, with more creative ideas. But I think it's key that every member of the county staff try and take some role or some responsibility, and really strive to be there for their fellow workers, their peers, so that we can all move forward to getting this back on, not to where we were, on a new track, but we can do it together.
Yeah, and those are the discussions, I think, that take some time, to figure out, and to figure out those fairness questions. I will say, over this year, when we've been talking about, those who have to be present versus those that aren't, a lot of times, what we're really doing is protecting those who had to be here by reducing densities in the
Right.
building. And that won't be the case going forward. There's gonna be a pivot, right? To your point, Patty. And it's at the point where we pivot, where it's no longer driven by protecting from this disease or from this virus, to how do we want to work, and what are the pros and cons of different ways of working for us as an organization.
So I have several questions, John, and you can tell me, you can table them if they're going to come up
Okay.
later on in the conversation. I think Patty's discussion brings up it's like an example of like equity and equality, right? Like, how do you get at the goal in the best way? And I guess one of the things I worry about is, what does our retention look like under these circumstances? And what are barriers for people? Are people, do we have staff who are running into childcare issues that, they've had to adjust for the last 16 months or whatever, and now are in a position to sort of try and scramble for childcare in order to be back in person? Those are some of the things that I have concerns about. And then I would also like to hear a bit more detail about the outreach to staff, because I know at our retreat, we had asked that the staff really be included in sort of in the design and the self-determination of how this reopening process looks. And so just some of what that process has looked like and what you expect to continue to do for the next phase would be helpful.
So the bigger questions around the challenges with equity, or challenges that employees might have coming back, I think those are all conversations that are still emerging. I think what we know is that there's a lot more pressure on housing, and we have employees just like every other employer who are already struggling with that, who are struggling more now. Childcare, similar kind of situation. It still, I think, feels like getting a winning lottery ticket sometimes when you are able to get that slot. So we are seeing those types of challenges for the workforce, and we do know that the more flexible work policies are helping right now with that. What that looks like going forward and what the right thing to do is, that's just a harder conversation that we need to have. And that's not going to be addressed in this presentation. That's kind of in the TBD, I think, for the phase 5. In terms of this next phase of reopening, departments, basically we had departments work with their staffs in terms of the framework and getting input. Each department probably handled that differently. It's not necessarily uniform across the board. I know we started talking just in our department about starting informally about what's really worked and what's been a real challenge, and what do you keep, what don't you keep, what are some how do we want to start coming back? How do we feel comfortable? What's that next incremental step? And you've probably been closer to the discussions with each individual department. I don't know if you have insight into how outreach occurred and how far it went into the organization, I think. Mm-hmm. And then...
Right. Yeah. So, every department, I think, did it a little differently, but we offered resources to departments based upon actually a questionnaire that Public Health put together for their team that really identified what their, barriers were to in-person work and concerns and what things they missed and so forth. So we provided that questionnaire to each of the departments. I can just say from the finance team, we discussed it at one of our team meetings and encouraged people to, if they didn't want to speak publicly, then to email me, and collected all of, that information, all the input. It was, all quite, it was all very good, and a lot of it, there was definitely some common themes regarding especially commuting and missing the collaborative sort of work environment. So each department did it a little differently, I think, but each did solicit feedback from all of their employees. But maybe we want to go do something a little different over the summer, something a little more formal, and get feedback from employees about the future through a questionnaire or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll think about that. Thank you.
I do have one suggestion.
Yes, Patty, go ahead.
We need to do a reservation system for the third floor outside deck. Because everybody's going to be fighting over who gets to use that space. So it might be wise to set that up ahead of time to ward off anybody going, well, I was here first. Yeah. So, because that's a perfect place for those small outside meetings. It's also a perfect place just to have lunch or, whatever. But, so I think we should look into setting that up.
I'm ready for the shower to be open, too. Okay.
I will take that as an action item.
I think we can handle that one. That's a piece of cake.
Well, I was thinking about having a finance treasurer sort of team meeting out there in the next few weeks. When we're all out there, that means there's no room for anybody else. So, anyway, so this slide, we're talking a little bit about just the employee health and well-being, having a lot of resources available, and I'll go through that in a little bit. some of these things I think we've just really already talked about. That structural balance between remote and in-person work is something we'll be trying to figure out over the summer, testing different scenarios. And then the COVID playbook that we've developed, policies and guidelines. So we'll be going live with that very soon. It's a work in progress, and we've basically developed a website, not a static document, so we can change things very quickly, especially, for example, if public health orders change and we want to make adjustments. But it will have information on or ideas like on commuting, what the policies are regarding sharing carpools, also ideas on, for example, incorporating health and well-being into your morning commute and giving people information on recycles, or just making suggestions about parking at Brush Creek and riding bikes, things like that. Talking about basically safety and etiquette, how to talk to people correctly about vaccines. For instance, people should not, ask directly. It should be voluntary. It's not mandatory to offer up that information. So just giving employees guidance on such things as that.
I will say, I do think that would be helpful. Those would be helpful tips for the board too, because we may be tempted to ask staff who are joining us in the room their status, and that might not be appropriate. So I would encourage the sharing of that information with us as well, so we can
absolutely
be attuned and astute.
Can you see my the hours of operation now on the screen?
Yeah, if I walk right up and put my face up.
I mean, we can see it. We can't read it. It's awfully small.
Oh,
that's a little
too
bigger.
small.
That's better.
Okay, well. So what we decided, since this may also change over the summer as well, is to put the hours of operation of each of the county facilities and departments in one place on the website. It'll be front and center, clickable through from the homepage of the website, and then each department's homepage will click back to this. So we'll always just be changing hours of operation in one place, unless it's something like the landfill or the airport where, they always operate in a different way. But for each department here, you can see by building the hours of operation and whether they're available for appointments or walk-ins, both, or just one or the other.
Perfect.
And so for the
Patty has a
admin
question
and
for
sheriff's
you.
office building, sorry.
Go ahead, Patty.
Yeah, and if you finish, I just have a question. Well, I'll come back to on these times. Do you want me to ask it now, or do you want me to wait?
Sure.
Okay.
I was just going to talk about time.
Okay, the assessor's office, this is an extremely busy time with the property reevaluations that just came out. We've already had people calling us, people, coming to the, is there a specific reason why they're not really coming in person until a month later? I'm a little concerned about that public service, because this is one of the high times for that department to offer public service.
Yeah, and that is, gosh, and I thought they were going in the second week of June, but I guess it was July.
Is there?
I did too. I'm not sure that this is correct.
Yeah,
but we'll confirm.
We have been having that same discussion with the assessor's office. So good catch. When I first read this, I obviously need to go to the eye doctor, because I read all these as June and June 6th. So let's go back and look at that, because we did have that conversation with the assessor's office, and I think they're going to move up their appointment timeline. I don't think it's going to start June 1st. It's going to start somewhere in the second week of June.
I think,
and there was
I think the
reason
sooner
for it.
they can do it, if they could work it out, would be great, because it's not just the assessor that gets the calls, the Board of Commissioners gets the calls.
Yeah, and
So
so does the
we're trying
treasurer.
to be that face of the public for the assessor's office, and and we need, so if we could see what we could do in that, I'd be a lot more comfortable. Thank you, Anne.
Let me look that up real quick. And Ann, I'll let you go on to time then.
Yeah. So for the administration and sheriff's office building, everybody got together and we decided 8:30 to 4:30 the doors would actually be open to the public. And this is coincides exactly with the clerk and recorder's traditional hours. And we did that so that there wouldn't be people coming into the building at 8 and then not really being able to get into the clerk and recorder's office, which is where they typically would be going to since they're one of the busiest. So it's been 8:30 to 4:30 over the winter, and so that seems to have worked quite well, and we decided to continue that. And then you can see the other buildings, human services, essentially open by appointment only. Obviously, senior services is fully open. Public Works and Solid Waste Center, they've been fully open essentially for some time, as has the library. And then with the airport, we decided that the best source of information was always going to be the airport website. So just provided a link there.
And I did just go back and reread the email, and she did put July 6th in, so we
Well,
will
we need to work
revisit
on that. I think
with-
that's critical because it's just an issue of fairness, and this is a really busy time for the assessor's office, so it really makes sense that we have somebody in that office. And I'm not talking fully staffed. I'm just talking somebody where people can make appointments and come in sooner than later because of the filing of their appeals, et cetera, just clarification of the information. And some people just don't like doing things over the phone or over, emails or text messages. They like to come in and sit down with somebody, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, so I may need some board support on
I'm giving my support right now.
that.
I was just
We need
speaking
to
for one
check
of us.
in, let's check in other board members. Sorry, Francie, I'm seeing your hand now. I do want to do a check-in about encouraging the assessor to open in June rather than July. So I'm looking to Steve and Francie if that's an acceptable request from us to her. I saw Steve.
Are you asking me to respond to that or to ask my question? I'm not sure which.
First to respond to the request from our board to the assessor to open in June rather than July.
Definitely. My question was, does this reflect pre-COVID times and availabilities? That's why I was hesitant to answer about the assessor, because did it used to just be open? You could come in and see the assessor, or was it always by appointment? Or
I will defer to John.
I would say
and
every
Ann.
department was open to walk-ins.
every department was.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to, you have to have an appointment to come into the county building and meet with our staff for a lot of the departments. I'm wondering why that is.
Density.
Francie, it helps us manage densities at peak times and spread out. And so that's one of the experiences the clerk and recorder had. So again, this is all part of the effort to try and keep both public and employees safer and reduce the risk of transmission in the building.
So what if somebody drives up from the other end of the county and they get there and they're told you have to have an appointment? It just seems really, I don't know what the word is, unfriendly, obviously, but also inconvenient for people who don't get the word that you have to have an appointment. I mean, maybe you'll publish it once that this is the case, but, people are used to being able to go into their county buildings and their public buildings and do their business. And so I'm just wondering what happens when you have a situation like that, or is there a way we can control the flow of, I don't really picture crowds showing up, but if there's a way we could do it without looking so shut down and unfriendly.
Well, can I just respond to that, Kelly, really quick?
Sure.
Francie, just so you know, I've seen that happen at the front. The people come in, and in many cases, they will call and staff will work them in if they've made the travel, if possible, or they'll say, we have an appointment in an hour, can you come back? So I think staff tries to accommodate people who've made the travel and didn't have an appointment as best they can. I've also seen, having worked in the building for many years, lines out the door at the clerk and recorder's office. Lunchtime, first thing in the morning, last thing in the afternoon. And so that's why the clerk and recorder had to go to appointments. And I think this is probably going to be revised as the phases move forward. And there's more of a level of comfort to having the public and social distancing and more vaccination percentages, et cetera. But, and I totally understand they come all the way up, or people get angry out there, but staff does their best to accommodate those people.
And we have an incentive to move away when, you know, it seems more appropriate to have increased densities, because the scheduling is an extra layer of work. But we do try, Francie, and accommodate folks as much as we can. It's not a bureaucratic stiff arm. We're just trying to put some processes in place, because believe it or not, we do have times where there's high demand, even though we're not selling beer or anything here. It's
Well, and alternatively, I've heard feedback that people appreciate the option to have an appointment. So they're not stuck waiting in line at the motor vehicle for hours to be seen. They know their slot. It's confirmed. They can plan their day and their travel around it.
It would be really nice if we returned some chairs to the places where you wait. Because when I came to clerk and recorder to register something, I had to stand in that hall for an hour, and I finally said, are there any chairs in this building that I could sit in? You know, we took them all out with COVID, but so that would be one thing, because the appointments are not necessarily on time. So just a small suggestion.
Good suggestion.
I believe that we will have chairs for people to sit on while they're waiting in line at the clerk and recorder.
It seems like a minor thing, but after half an hour standing outside that door, it didn't feel so minor to me. Thank you, Ann.
Right.
So did she support the assessor opening sooner?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's keep going. We have 8 minutes.
And Steve supported it?
Oh.
Yes.
Thank you. I didn't see the nod.
Yep.
So these are some of the key themes of this phase 4, and that's flexibility, with it being a phased, graduated approach to expanded opening. We expect things to evolve over the summer. And respect, we're encouraging respect, obviously, of the public, but also of our employees, of each other, understanding that everybody has a different level of comfort and risk during this phase, which is rather sort of gray and nebulous. As the city market example was perfect. Not really quite sure what's going on half the time. Responsibility. Our employees to self-screen, stay home when sick, and even allergies. John has mentioned that most of the people he knows who thought they had allergies actually really had COVID. So even if it just is like your annual sneezing fit, stay home and get tested. And then another key theme that we've mentioned several times is looking to the future and how we craft, how we learn and pilot for our new work environment going forward. And essentially the summary right here, we propose to sort of expand our opening on June 1 and spend the summer looking towards phase 5.
Okay, any additional questions or concern for Ann and John? Patty?
Ann, you mentioned that ComDev will fill us in more on the environmental issues. I'm just going to make a statement now as part of this discussion that I understand the lack of, the decrease in people having to commute and be on the road and all of that, and the energy use in our building has gone down because nobody's home. But people are home in their homes. Mm-hmm. So we have to also take that. I don't know if ComDev brought that into the equation.
I believe they did.
Yeah, okay, because I know there's a balance in there. So when I leave my house, I turn the heat down or off sometimes to come to the office. And so if you're staying in your home to work, you're going to keep your heat on. And so, we need to look at that. And, I think it's a time that, Ann's suggestions for people to figure out how to get to work differently, maybe. or to utilize those options that we're presenting to the public and encouraging the public to use. Hopefully we can get more staff to take part in that.
Francie.
I just have a question about the expectations for commissioners once we get out of COVID, or now that we're out of COVID. I mean, are we expected to be there and be accessible to the public at times? I don't know, because I've never been commissioner without COVID.
Oh, do you mean like office hours, Francie?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
No, the board doesn't maintain regular office hours. Typically, so much of your work is done out in the community. Sometimes when you least expect it, at the grocery store or whatnot, right? But
Really?
you know, you have the option and opportunity to use the county facilities for meetings or such, but I think we recognize that so much of the work you do is going to community groups or meetings, or meeting constituents here. It's usually on a scheduled basis versus walk-ins. Now, I've worked with board members in the past who have established office hours and published those. That hasn't been so much a practice here, but those are all options for you. But there is not there's not hours that you have to be here. I do think one of the things the board is probably going to want to talk about is as we go into the hybrid board meetings and such, that's typically the work sessions and regular meetings are your most typical touch points with the public. You know, are you all wanting to be in the room? Do you want to stay hybrid? That sort of thing. We're clearly offering the option to stay hybrid right now. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, it does, and I want to be there. I just don't want to wear a mask for 7 hours, and you know, it's a big deal to wear a mask for 7 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So interested to hear more, maybe at a future time when Kelly and I aren't pressed here for another meeting or whatever. But about about the sensitivity towards asking people if they're vaccinated, because I mean, kids can't go to school unless they're vaccinated. You know the routine. So. You know, and if we're all there, let's say all 5 of us are there, and a person wants to be there, they could voluntarily tell us they're vaccinated, but I don't know. We could talk about it another time, because we clearly don't have time.
Sure, and we can revisit it a little later today, or maybe we'll wait till we have a full board. But yeah, I think individuals are going to have different sensitivities. You know, I'm managing the risk for 2 young children that can't get vaccinated. So, there's just different profiles for each person. But I think we also have to get direction sort of our legal compliance, that we're not putting staff in uncomfortable positions or others in uncomfortable positions, you know, by requesting personal medical data either. So it is a bigger conversation, and I think I'll just note it, Francie, for us to revisit it when Greg is back, because I think it's something that we should discuss as a full board.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Any other final questions on the reopening for our public services?
I have some, but I think they can wait until the process moves along. I'm going to keep them. I made some notes. I'll just keep it to see how the phases fold out. And there might be more appropriate if I just talk to Ann at some point. It's more about the finances, actually. The finances, which is appropriate for me to talk to Ann about, of people working from home and county equipment, et cetera.
Yeah, we're wrestling with that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
All right, thank you. And what's our date? June
1st.
June 1st. So members of the public, June 1st, we look forward to receiving you in a bit more open capacity. And please visit our website for those hours to find the different departments, contact information, and hours, and opportunities for accessing them. And we look forward to serving you. So with that, we're going to take a break. For 15 minutes, and we will see you all back here at 2:15. Thank you. And Francie, I'm going to jump off this. She already jumped off. Okay, welcome back everyone to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on May 25th, and we're reconvening. I had taken a short break to go into an APSHA special meeting. Francie is still in that meeting in order to retain a quorum there, and she will join us when that concludes. And so with that, we'll get back onto our schedule with a COVID-19 update.
All right, thanks, Kelly. And I will try and get through this a little quickly here. All right, so few updates for you. We'll talk about just where we are with the metrics, all good news. Vaccination update, go over the public health changes that will take place starting on the 28th, and then talk a little bit about our summer communications. So case counts have remained low. Our 7-day case counts are staying in that green level of the dial. Similarly, our test positivity has remained low, at the high of 2.3%. In terms of how our incidence rate compares, we remain one of the smaller number of counties that are in green according to our incidence rate. We are watching kind of what's happening, particularly on the western slope. I think some of the variants from India and the UK in particular have taken a hold in Mesa County, so we'll be continuing to watch their case counts. But right now, for us, the news remains good. Similarly, our vaccine numbers continue to look good, but maybe some concern with, still where we're sitting state and nationally. Our Pickens County numbers, we estimate now 74% with the first dose, 61% fully vaccinated. That number is going to continue to go up on these 2-week cycles. We expect Colorado is just at about 50% with 1 dose and 43% fully vaccinated, which is pretty similar to what's happening nationally. The numbers I saw actually, I think just below 50% with 1 dose and 39.8% fully vaccinated. Of course, internationally, the picture is very, very different. I could not pull the first dose, but we're at 5.9% fully vaccinated. And we're seeing what's happening in some of the countries who do not have as high a vaccination rate. Clearly, from a public health perspective, our public health staff feels that these higher vaccination rates that we have in Pickens County is contributing to our lower numbers right now. We are going to be watching what continues to happen nationally and internationally, particularly as we get back into visitors coming into town and that sort of thing. We have, throughout the pandemic, taken a little bit more conservative approach, and we continue to take a more conservative approach going forward, even with the reopening. This summer is really going to be a test about how these higher vaccination rates really do protect as you reintroduce a population that's probably going to have lower vaccination rates in terms of visitors. We are shifting strategy. We've talked about this at previous meetings, but a little bit more detail. There will be weekly clinics at Community Health Services. They will, we are consistently requesting Pfizer vaccines there, particularly to meet the needs of 12 to 15-year-olds. It's directly on a bus line. We found that that's been a pretty good location, and you have a little bit slower uptake with that. We did do a clinic at the school. We'll continue to assess data and look at whether we need to do a larger clinic as school approaches again. We are also shifting to smaller pop-up clinics where we're working with business sectors. So this week, for example, we're working with lodging and doing a clinic at the St. Regis. We're also working with restaurant sectors, outfitters, just a number of those sector representatives to try and reach either new employees that are coming in or employees we didn't reach during our mass vax clinic, just making it easier to get the vaccine, hopefully harder to say no to it. And then we are starting to implement mobile clinics really targeted around equity and hard to reach populations. This week we'll be going to our safe outdoor space to try and capture some of the homeless population that may not have gotten captured in earlier phases. We're also, our new communications director has taken on the role of equity conversations and is reaching out to various groups, and we'll be setting up mobile clinics around those discussions and ability to serve hard to reach populations. They're going to be on smaller scales, 20 to 50 people probably at a time as we go out and do that. We have high vaccination rates already in Pickens County, and so the folks that we're reaching now are either because they've been hesitant, they've been hard to reach or such, and so we're going to continue moving forward just with smaller daily numbers.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Patty, go ahead.
I heard this past week about a group of, I don't know what the actual age group, it was the under 18, but I don't know if they were in their teens, that actually were vaccinated in Garfield County, I believe, without any parental signature of consent or authorization.
That does not sound right to me if they're under 18.
I thought you had to have a signature in some form from a parent, whether the parent had to be with you still should have had a piece of paper with the parent's signature, parent's contact information. I was very surprised by that.
Yeah, and I can't speak to that.
Okay. Well, I question the legality, because if I had been a parent that, didn't have some kind of information, something that I had to sign for my 14, 15-year-old, it'd be concerning. Okay, I'll find out more information and just see what, and if there's a new rule we don't know about, I don't know.
No, I don't believe so. I can check with our staff, but I don't think there have been any exceptions.
That's just standard medical, legal issue.
I will say that these smaller clinics and such actually take a little bit more to get organized and such. So right now our case investigation staff is not as busy, so we're repurposing some of their time to support vaccinations and communications and those sorts of things. We do want to keep that capacity in place for this next busy season in case we do have outbreaks. You all are probably already familiar with this, but beginning May 28th, there will be really just a few public health requirements retained in the public health order, including face coverings in indoor settings. We just talked about that a little bit, and on public transportation. Businesses may allow individuals to remove their masks in indoor public setting if 80% of the guests have shown proof of a vaccination. And we've really left it to businesses to have their own process for that. We'll be checking in with them, but we don't have, for example, a national or state level like vaccine passport or app. We're letting the businesses tell us how are you doing that verification. We, of course, will still be, have isolation and quarantine requirements in our public health order for those who are not fully vaccinated. The protective measures that we've had in place will continue to be recommendations. Of course, get vaccinated, wearing a mask in public places that may not require it, so outdoors or that sort of thing if you can't maintain 6 feet of distance or if you're not vaccinated, staying home when sick, 6 feet distancing, washing hands, and following industry-specific guidance. This is now evidence-based, though, and so particularly with the 6-foot distancing, which was a requirement in indoor spaces, which limited capacity at restaurants or retail or such, that will no longer be a requirement but a choice of those venues. Business safety plans will no longer be required. We are still working with our consumer protection team. We're really adapting those business safety plans to more of a business toolkit with best practices and such to support businesses who want to continue to take COVID precautions and to really use that as in their own marketing and efforts to attract customers. Similarly, event safety plans will not be required, but will continue as a toolkit for event safety plans. However, in working with all the entities that issue special events permits or events permits, they've integrated that safety plan process into that permitting process. So there will still be event safety plans that are submitted as part of permitted events. Previously, public health was reviewing events that may not have required a permit. So the larger events will still have a COVID safety plan element with them.
I just want to add really quick, at the ACRA meeting this morning, there was a comment made when we were talking about possible tourism numbers for the summer, and that a lot of people will come here for our outdoor events that do have some level of protective plan in place. So for people who are thinking we don't need it, it may actually be better for your business or your event if you have some kind of a safety plan, best practices in line. So if people call, they'll feel more comfortable in buying a ticket or coming to your event. So that's a real positive, I think, for people who have been so tired of having to do plans. There's a benefit that we're seeing that came out of this last winter.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Patty, and I think in our discussions with the different sector groups, that was a lot of the conversation too. We do have a community that's wanting to do the right things, and so that makes it easier, and it makes it possible for us to move to toolkits versus requirements. I did cover those, yes.
Sorry.
Beginning May 28th, we will discontinue some of our programs that we put a lot of effort into. The Traveler Responsibility Code will no longer be required. We won't have an affidavit to sign. Also, the 5-star program, as we move away from capacity limits and such, will no longer be in place. We will be continuing to monitor data. We're pivoting away from looking at incidence rate to looking at measures of serious illness. We're still hoping to get more clarity from the state in terms of how they're measuring it. But we're really going to be looking at these RETAC regions for regional hospital capacity, for both ICU and general bed capacity, and if either of those in our region exceed 85%, or if our local hospital, so AVH capacity is threatened, or even looking a little farther down valley, potentially Valley View. If we're seeing that regional capacity start to be of concern, particularly because of a COVID surge, then we would have a snapback provision into dial level restrictions again, and it probably snap back to more orange or red level restrictions until hospital beds become more available. The likelihood of that happening we see as very, very low, but at the point, if we do realize that risk, it's going to be important to take quick and strong action to start to limit interactions and COVID spread. But again, we see the likelihood of using this snapback provision, especially with our vaccination rates where they stand right now, as being very, very low. And this is a fun stat that came, well, not a fun stat, that's not the right way to put it, but a interesting stat that came out from the New York Times and U.S. News and World Report. They took the, of the 3,300 counties in the nation, they took the top 25 as ranked by University of Missouri and Aetna Foundation as the 25 healthiest counties, and looked at which ones had the highest and lowest deaths per population. You'll see that Pickens County, we oftentimes heard that, hey, we're not seeing deaths and such because we're already a pretty healthy county. Well, when you compare us against the 25 healthiest counties in the nation, we had the lowest COVID death rate of any of those 25 counties by a large, large margin. And in talking to our epi staff, epidemiological staff and such, they credit that to a number of things. Of course, some of the really challenging public health actions that we took and requirements we put in place, but also the way that we in the community stepped up to support those who are most impacted. So, whether it be the cash support we gave through Human Services, or the efforts of the Aspen Community Foundation and private donors to try and alleviate some of the impacts of those things so that we could more strictly adhere to these public health orders. It's just a great way of looking at now all of those things and all of the community's efforts and challenges that we've gone through probably did result in saving some lives. So that's a list you do want to be at the bottom of. And then you can see.
I'm just surprised other counties aren't. Like, where's Gunnison County?
And out of these top 25, there's like 6 counties in Colorado that are in that top numbers.
Kelly, I'm sorry to break in, but it looks like Francie is stuck as an attendee, and I believe she needs to be promoted in as a panelist.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Zach. Were you able to get her in? Okay. Yeah, so that's a number that came out yesterday. I think it's one for us to continue paying attention to. And then in the middle here, some of the collateral that we'll be using as we pivot our communication strategy going into the summer. We're really focusing on a responsibility and respect message, and this will be bilingual. We also have changed the messaging a little bit based on some cultural considerations that were brought to our attention. So for our Latinx community, some of the translations will be different. Instead of talking about individuals, talking about us and we instead of you and I. So you'll see a little bit of difference there based on feedback that we've received. But we're really going to focus on responsibility and respect and continuing to push those messages in terms of masking and distancing and continuing to do those things that we're anxious to be done with, but just have a little bit longer to go before we reach those vaccination levels nationally and internationally. I think I may have gotten done almost in time there.
I am so
All right,
impressed.
questions. Steve?
John, I had seen a report from Mesa County that telling about how they have the variant from India there.
That's correct.
And quite a few people have caught it. They think it was from one person bringing it in. I presume that our medical staff up here is tuned into that and kind of looking for that. But that they also had 3 people die within the last week or so in Mesa County. So it sounds a little bit scary because that's not that far away. And we're actually going to Grand Junction this weekend, so I'm a little bit concerned about it, but I think I'll probably just take extra precautions when I'm around other people there.
Yeah, Steve, we're continuing to sample tests or sequence tests for variants. I do not believe we've identified any cases of the Indian variant at this point, but we do share populations, up and down the Roaring Fork and Colorado River valleys, and so it's one of the reasons that we're continuing to be cautious, even though our numbers are low. We want to keep them that way, and certainly avoid some of the serious illness. I will say our vaccination rates right now are much higher than Mesa County's. And I do believe that the vaccines have shown effectiveness against these variants to different levels. But we probably have an added layer of protection there as a community right now too.
What is our rate of vaccination?
Yeah, Francie, sorry, I got to that, I think, before you were able to join us here.
Yeah, sorry.
So we're at 74% with 1 dose, 61% fully vaccinated. And then
That's awesome.
I have some numbers for Colorado, the nation, and what I could find internationally in here too. And I believe Mesa County is in the high 30% right now in those first doses.
That's really low.
Or, yeah.
Other questions? Okay.
All right.
Not seeing any, so
Thanks, John.
we'll move
You
forward.
didn't say, what is it, in
Box
the
it in.
box once.
I almost did, Patty, but I used case investigation.
I mean, just giving me a different name to have to follow.
Okay. Moving on, if we are ready to start early, I see Zach and Cindy and Ellen here with us. So are you guys ready to start 5 minutes early?
I'm ready, yeah.
Okay. Are you leading the show here, Zach? All right. So we are moving on. We're going to have a discussion of our resolution from 2019 endorsing a declaration of a climate emergency and requesting regional collaboration to counter climate change and preserve a flourishing environment. So welcome. Nice to see our long-range planning staff and climate action staff. So Cindy and Zach and Ellen, take it away.
Johnson here, isn't he? Okay.
Go ahead.
So, the primary discussion today is about amending the climate declaration from 2019, climate emergency declaration from 2019, to establish some long-term climate action goals. This was one of the directions we received out of your retreat. And as you can see, let me just pull it up real quick. We have these three goals that are being proposed at this time. The first one is our emissions reduction target. This is partially the science-based portion of it and partially to bring ourselves in alignment with the state of Colorado's stated climate action objective, which is a 90% reduction by 2050 from their 2005 baseline. We do not have a 2005 baseline to go off of. We are currently in the process of doing a regional greenhouse gas inventory in partnership with the city of Aspen, the town of Basalt, and Snowmass Village. And I believe as part of this recommendation that that will be a far better baseline to go off of than our previous inventories, as it's just a little bit more of a rigorous methodology, and it would be more reflective of where we actually stand as a firm goal to get there. The other side of that is in order to maintain our adherence to the Paris Accord, we need to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Just to clarify, when we say carbon emissions, the standard policy in the climate policy world is to convert all emissions, so that's methane, nitrous oxide, all of that, to CO2 equivalent. So when we say carbon, we are really referring to all of the greenhouse gas emissions. It's just a shorthand way of phrasing it. And to meet our needs, we need to get to net zero by 2050. And this 90% means that we only have to capture about 10% of our emissions to really achieve that net zero. The other side of that is by 2060, we essentially need to be net negative. So we need to be removing more greenhouse gas emissions than we are emitting. But that is going to require some significant technological development that's not really available now. Whereas this 90% target is actually achievable with current technology. It just requires a great deal of behavioral and policy shifts. One other part of this goal is that out of the retreat, you established that you wanted equity and community character to be considered as well. And so I included that in this goal as well, as we can take actions on climate change, but they may not be equitably distributed in their impact. So just to make sure that just because it's good for the environment doesn't mean we're negatively impacting those who have the least ability to deal with the ramifications of it. The second goal that we're proposing today is to deal with the currently felt and further imminent impacts of climate change, drought, wildfire, increased avalanches that we've been seeing. This is going to require us to significantly adapt our current infrastructure and our land use policies, as well as taking steps to protect our environment from these natural disasters that are already occurring. And so that's the purpose of the second goal, is just to make sure that we're taking our steps, our responsible steps as public guardians to make sure that our current assets are being protected for these competing impacts. And then the last goal that we're proposing today is to really do our best to involve the regular citizenry in both developing whatever policies we're going to need to achieve the first two goals, as well as to help with educating them on the things they can do. This 90% target is really only achievable with buy-in from the public. Our operations as a government entity is about 3% of the total emissions, so we really need buy-in from the public. And that's not just telling them what they can do, that means that we need to bring them into the actual discussion of what policies are going to be needed to get there. And just to give an idea of the things that we can do, I just want to quickly show a little bit from this overview that I've been doing. So I'm currently in the process of doing an internal operations greenhouse gas inventory. This is a very rough overview. It will be a comprehensive report when it's finished, but I just wanted to show a brief comparison of what 2019 to 2020 looks like. So between those 2 years, as a result of COVID and the change to our operations from it, we saw a little bit more than a 13% reduction in our emissions stemming just from operations that we have direct financial and operational control over. So this is primarily our fleet operations, the commuters of our employees there, and our facilities. I will say one of the reasons the facilities is so low is as a reduction is actually because we had the ambulance barn and Health and Human Service Center renovation both complete around the same time that COVID started. So we saw an increased use of natural gas as well as 2020's winter. From what I can see of the data, seemed to be a little bit more intense than 2019, which increases our natural gas usage as that's our primary heating source. So that's why the facilities reduction isn't as large as you would probably expect. The largest one you can obviously see is commuters. The actual emissions from commuting from home to the office significantly reduced by a little bit more than 28%, or nearly 7 times the greenhouse CO2 equivalent tonnage than of our facilities. As Patty alluded to earlier, just because we aren't emitting from the facilities doesn't mean those emissions aren't happening at home. Also tying back into equity, we are actually shifting the cost of the electrical usage to employees as well. So that will be something we'll have to consider with remote work, that we are shifting some of our cost of operations back onto the employees themselves as well. But that's just a really nice snapshot, I think, of what COVID did to us relating to emissions as a really high-level overview. Like I said, I will be coming back with a more comprehensive report. But I thought it's a nice way to show that while 90% reduction may seem like a lot, in just 1 year as an operational entity, we were able to reduce by 13%. So there is quite a bit that we can do with existing technology and existing behavioral patterns to really take substantive steps to achieving that goal. I am going to be presenting the amended resolution to you all tomorrow. But before we did that, I would just like to have some discussion with all of you to see if those goals are in compliance with what your vision for our climate action policies and goals should be, if you think any changes need to be made, or if I completely missed the mark or not. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Kelly, and for questions and discussion.
Great, thank you. Patty?
Yeah, Zach, great
And
work
Steve.
as always. As far as the goals, I agree with them. I myself would be more comfortable in one to end the statement after distribute policy impacts. And then I would like to see the mention to involve citizens and stakeholders of different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds in outreach. For me, that's a good place to put that. We want people from all socioeconomic backgrounds and racial backgrounds to be involved in the outreach and education programs. And I think the character and equitable distribute policy impacts, I think that for me covers the broader spectrum of the diverse demographics. So for me, I would like that language from 1 move to 3, but I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
Removed from one, or do you want it in both of them?
No, I think 1 should end at policy impacts, the end of the statement, because you already say equitably distribute. To me, that covers it. And then put the different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds into the part about we're going to involve the citizens. If we want to repeat it twice, that's fine, but I think it's important to note that in their citizen and stakeholder involvement. So that's a suggestion, but I have another question.
Go ahead.
How did you calculate with commuters? How did you calculate those numbers?
So ensuring that we protected employee privacy. So I actually don't know what address goes to which employee. I purely received the addresses for every single employee of Pickens County. At the time I did it, there were 374. Obviously that's changed a little bit, but it's a good, considering it's just 2020, it is really accurate for 2020 and 2019. I can't accurately predict the exact path they take to the office every day, but I went into Google and did the shortest path from their home to their office for all 374 employees.
Wow.
I have the bus data of the zone passes that we've issued for both 2019 and 2020. And I know what towns they come from, so I was able to just kind of pick them out as evenly distributed as I can. And so I know those who are within 4 miles, I just assume they walked or biked. Obviously, that's not a 100% true assumption, but it's close enough. I then have the conversion factors for what our bus policy is. The only ones that I'm missing is we actually do have 3 vans that we use, which is one of the most efficient forms of that, and so I need to go back and add that. I would give the final number a plus or minus of 5% off of those assumptions, so it's not 100% accurate, but I believe it's a really good picture of what our emissions from commuters are.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That was a lot of work, but let's just hope while they were working from home, they weren't like taking their cars out during the day and driving all over the down valley and doing their, yeah, so I'm just kidding you on that. But that was very creative, and that was a significant amount of work. So thanks, Zach.
Steve.
And I do want to just give a quick plug for Josh at Facilities. He was wonderful in providing me the data. What they are keeping track of is truly amazing. I want to give a plug for Danielle in Finance. I requested every invoice from 2019 to 2020 from Holy Cross and Black Hills Energy, and she, without question, just helped me with it. They did a lot of work on their part, and then also Patty and Nicole in HR did a wonderful job of giving me the bus data and the address data. So it's really been a collaborative effort, and it wouldn't have been possible without their assistance as well.
Wow, it's amazing.
Cool, thanks, Zach. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Kelly. The one part, Zach, that I think I would change the wording a little bit is where you say to reduce annual emissions. And I looked into that. I read through the governor's report from the state, and they actually oftentimes call it pollution instead of emissions, which to me, pollution is something different than emissions. But what I would suggest is to, instead of saying emissions, say greenhouse gas emissions, just so if somebody's reading it who doesn't understand the science and the thought process behind it, that would make it more explanatory. And
yeah, I think that makes sense. I know that decarbonization and emissions causes a lot of confusion, so I think you're right. Being more specific is probably a good way to go.
Yeah, and then that brings up the question of the greenhouse gas. I think we're just trying to have a general, the CO2 equivalent reduction is what we're striving towards. We could get more specific, but I don't know if we want to do that and say we want to have a 90% reduction in CO2, a 90% reduction in methane, and I'll list all the different ones, but I don't think that's probably necessary for our purposes. Is that what your thought is?
Yeah, and so what I use is an EPA conversion factor, and so what they've done is they've converted all of those to CO2 equivalent, so it's a straight one-to-one transfer. And that is standard procedure, which is why I didn't specify. Whenever you see a greenhouse gas inventory, they typically use CO2 equivalent, which is, again, an assumption I made, I guess, when I don't talk with people who are in it every day. It might cause some confusion.
So one follow-up, when I was thinking about methane emissions, thinking, well, maybe we don't have very much methane emissions here, but then I was wondering about leakage from our natural gas pipelines and the delivery to the different buildings, that there undoubtedly is some leakage from that, and that would be where we could be leaking methane into the atmosphere. I don't know if we have any way to track that, or if Black Hills Energy has any sort of figures on that. I'd be curious to find out, though.
And we have the methane leak up Coal Basin also.
The
Black Hills
from the core board was that the methodology doesn't include that. So the standardization of the methodology doesn't include that, because I was very concerned when I heard about the Coal Basin numbers and some of the other potential numbers. But we want to try to keep with a standard methodology so that we're apples to apples when we're working with the other communities, but not ignore those issues for sure.
Francie.
Thank you, Zach, for that. That was really interesting. Great math. And I just have a question about when do and how do we get into the specifics of how we're going to do this? Like I was talking to Auden Schendler, for instance, and he says, we can't do it if we don't go to changing our building codes to 100% electric buildings, and then figuring out how to retrofit existing buildings, and you know, EV charging stations, and he mentioned the ABC of the lumber build there, and that would be a place to start. I know it's not us, but it would be one place that is looming in terms of a place to start. And so I'm just wondering, how are we going to make this happen? And when are we going to take the steps?
Well, I'm going to rely on Cindy to back me up a little bit on some of this, but the first one is that we have our own climate action plan. So the internal operations is really to serve as a baseline for our climate action plan for all the departments, to really give each department an idea of what their emissions are, what their assets that are at risk are, and then allow them to take steps to hopefully start chipping away at it. So that's the first one. Obviously, with the third goal, we do need to have a public outreach process, and at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy as she can speak a little bit more authoritatively on what that would be.
Well, that's yet to be worked out with you as the board, what you want that to look like. But I think, Francie, there are so many good projects that are already out there. As you know, with our building code, we've tightened it up significantly just last year when you approved on Earth Day the new building code. So we've got a lot of that going forward with a net zero goal within that for 2030. So we've got that on the way for buildings yet to be built. And we've also got that on the way for buildings that are making changes for 1,000 square feet and less. 1,000 square feet and more. Those new building regs apply. So there's a lot of efficiency there. What we're doing also, and with the funds that you provided for us, is we're doing some inventories of what it looks like given our zoning in terms of the build out in the future and what that might look like. And then all we can do with the transportation part right now is try to work collaboratively with EOTC and the other organizations and other communities to see what we can affect there. And as a community, I totally recommend that we try to work together with those other jurisdictions. We are working together with them through CORE, through our regional efforts right now in terms of getting a standardized greenhouse gas emissions for all the jurisdictions within Pickens County. So hopefully we're going to all have good data and we can start making really specific action items towards getting to the goals. I think we already have a lot of great action items that, as Zach said, are internal, but we also have some great ones that we've worked on through an alliance with the city and the City of Aspen. They call it the City of Aspen Climate Action Plan, but really it's more of a regional plan. And there are 48 action items that we can start looking at right away, and they already have. As far as a lot of the things we're doing, everything we're doing right now is through the lens of this, through the airport, with any other projects that we see coming online. So I think we've got a lot going on. And Zach, you were also going to, I think, maybe try to update real briefly on where we are with the microgrid grant through DOLA. So that's another one, Francie. I think we've just got a lot of pots and, on the fire right now, trying to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I am going to be doing the DOLA update. I was waiting for us to make sure that we were all good with the goals at hand. And I will just point out, we have wonderful partners in this valley. Holy Cross Energy is going net zero by 2030. that'll take us a long way. RAFTA is currently acquiring another 4 electric buses, which will bring them up to 8. So we're hardly the only ones getting there, but we will need to cooperate with all of them if that 90% goal is something we're going to achieve.
So I want to jump in because I have some questions before we get on to the grid update, I guess. How does these goals align with the goals that the city has and that CORE has?
So CORE does not, I do not believe, have an overall emissions reduction goal for the county. The city of Aspen is currently 80% by 2050 from their 2004 baseline. So this would actually be a more ambitious goal than what they've set. I do believe they're trying to take another look at that, as that goal has been in effect now for 16 years, 17 years. And they're looking at updating it to be a little bit more in alignment with the science consensus of net zero by 2050. So I know that that is something in the works. I don't know what the status of that is or where that will end up, but we are a little bit more ambitious than them with this goal.
Okay.
Where they currently stand.
Okay. I have more questions, but Steve, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm thinking about the airport, the emissions at the airport, which I don't think are in, I don't know, the fuel, it's not included in our greenhouse gas inventory, I don't believe, because of the flights coming from somewhere, they're using a lot of fuel. But if we can achieve some major reductions in greenhouse gas emissions at the airport and have airplanes switching to more green fuels or renewable fuels, could that count towards our reduction, achieving our reduction goals, even though that wasn't counted in the inventory?
It is actually counted in our regional inventory. So the airport does a greenhouse gas emissions inventory every 2 years. They actually do it a little bit more frequently. And they do take account for the emissions, not only that are distributed there, but they also do an account for some of the emissions that are expended in that 3-mile ceiling from the airport as well. So they do a pretty comprehensive analysis of the fuel used. And to answer your question, yes, if we go to cleaner fuel, that would count towards our reduction target.
Yeah, there could be a quantum kind of shift there if we all of a sudden have a really good source of renewable fuel. That could really move the dial a whole lot all in one fell swoop, but just from the airport.
For the airport, it would. I will caution you, the airport does not make up as much of the emissions of our county as you initially think it does. The number one source of our transportation emissions is not the airport, it's Highway 82 and commuters. So that's really the big culprit on the transportation side of our greenhouse gas emissions.
Can I just ask for a point of
Sure,
clarification?
Patty.
I know you have questions, Kelly.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
But Zach, didn't we just, through Atlantic Aviation at the FBO, put in a renewable source of fuel? I know Telluride beat us to it. We followed shortly thereafter, like a day or two. Telluride put in the first. We thought we were pulling first place there on that one. But I know that that's a plan, a startup, and now it's just a matter of finding a place nearer to Colorado where those biofuels are actually produced. So I think that's a huge step in the right direction, and I think we need to thank all of those that were involved, Atlantic Aviation, and I think Jackie Francis Tyler was really closely involved in that, really encouraging them to do so. So that was definitely a step in the right direction. And Zach, thank you for clarifying, because when we first looked at greenhouse gas emissions, we were slammed at the airport because of the way they were analyzing it. They were like, we were getting credit for all of the greenhouse gas produced across the country, and it was all coming here, and we were getting blamed for it. So I'm glad that we have found a way to make it a little more correct as to what we're actually doing here at Owen Airport. So thanks for that, Zach.
Well, and I guess I just want to ask, I mean, I'm fine with these, but I want to just be a little provocative because, for example, we are a member of CC4CA, and that group works by consensus. And so we authorized and have adopted a policy, or had, what's the word, endorsed a policy statement that is very specific and has, like 25 points, policy efforts. So why not take that approach, or why not sort of adopt all of those in the context of a resolution, or pick the ones that most are, most relevant for Pickens County, rather than these the 3 broad-based goals that you have set out here?
So these broad-based goals, I really serve as an aspirational objective for us to base all of the other action items that we go off of. So I just kind of think of it as a hierarchy of approach. And so this is really the foundation from which we can go off of and approach everything else. I find that whenever we try and take generalized things and apply them to Pickens County, we tend to run into a lot of unforeseen hurdles, because we do have a really unique economy and unique community here. And so that was why I did this. I believe that this would be the most directly relatable approach, and they provide a broad enough basis that if we want to adopt the CC4CA, we still can and meet that. But it also provides us the leeway to maybe take a more unique approach to achieving our objectives as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess I just want to give the summary of what I see this. This resolution tees up the BOCC's leadership for Pickens County to pivot our climate action plan away from only looking internally at our pollution impacts to a broader community plan and policy framework for, the entire county and all of the sectors and all of the community members' contributions to greenhouse gas pollution, rather than what we have now as more of a narrow commitment. Is that what we're doing in adopting this resolution? That's what I understand us to be doing. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to frame that for myself if it wasn't clear. So thank you. Patty.
Yeah, I want to go back to that, because when we first adopted or approved or moved forward with our own climate action plans, I was really impressed, because what we did was not set us up for failure. We started out small with what we could do internally, what each departments that were able to really do things, and then led by example with those departments to other departments. We had a lot of creativity come out of our staff with some very simple things, because it got people thinking. So I don't want to lose track of that in sharing where we started with our own internal, like Kelly said, and setting it up for the rest of the community to help us fail. We need to also start with those steps where we can actually see things are getting done, which I think then inspires people to continue to strive to do more, rather than trying to do something that's too much and failing and just throwing their hands up and not doing anything. So I think that was a great way that we first started out our climate action plan. It made great sense, and it kind of flew in the face of some people who wanted us to solve the problem in the next year, rather than say, that's impossible, but we're going to set it up for success, and then take that success and spread it out through our organization. And now we're at a point, I think, of taking our success and spreading it out through the community.
Okay, Francie.
So if I understand the way you summarized this, Kelly, this is a mandate for the BOCC to make policy decisions about what people can and cannot do in Pickens County. Is that right? I mean, on the broad term, obviously we're going to have to look at the things we've talked about, house size and TDRs and, stuff like that. And so that's kind of what I meant when I said...
Insofar as our policy decisions affect people. There are also personal and behavioral choice positions that affect people's greenhouse gas emissions too, that I don't think this extends to.
And so it's incumbent on ComDev or I don't know who to bring us things to take action on, or do we need to initiate some things on our own? And that, that's kind of what I was asking about when I asked before, like, okay, now what? So this definitely is a mandate, the way it reads. And obviously it's going to involve working with the city of Aspen, because it's sort of silly for us not to. And so I'm really looking forward to getting moving on this, and I'm just clarifying that that's what I'm hearing, right? This is a mandate to do something.
Yeah, so
Not
maybe,
this, but without the specification of what it is we're going to do.
yeah. And so we've thrown around a couple of different things. I think maybe just another take on the conversation. We have our internal climate action plan, which is really department specific. And then we also had a resolution that declared, a climate emergency. And I think where we started to get stuck is a pretty big jump to go from the internal climate action plan, which, Patty, I think you described it well. It was a pretty pragmatic approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions internally, to declaring an emergency, but the emergency didn't really give us a goal. It made everything urgent right away, which is, it's really, really difficult for us to do any planning around. And so I think, as Zach said, what this does is it gives us a goal. It gives us a destination and a timeline for us to be saying, this is what we're trying to achieve, both with our departments, but also with our partners, right? A lot of our partners, to the conversation that's just happening, may have more influence over some of this. So Holy Cross may have more influence, but being in coordination and partnership with them and understanding what our goals and timelines are, help us bring better recommendations to you. We were kind of stuck between two extremes. We didn't know quite how to move forward. So having a specific goal that says we're looking for X percentage by this time, it's overall, allows each of us to start to incorporate that in departmental plans, or, as you all have already said, we know there are some major policy decisions that you all are going to be considering coming forward, and this gives us now a benchmark to measure recommendations against. So that's really what we're looking for here, is what's our destination, then we can start to figure out the roadmaps, if that makes sense. And it
I think
will
if
be
pivot
external
was the
and
word of
internal.
2020, roadmap
Pivot,
is the word
yeah.
of 2021. Okay, so with that, I do have some language updates I'd like to propose to the board for the 3 goals here. So we'll revisit the one that Patty raised. I will say I do want to keep it in the first one, because I think that's where the impacts get assessed. And so the outcome is, let's not put more impact on certain communities than others. So my preference would be to keep that there. And then I'd also like to add the word measurable before implementation. So through the measurable implementation of policies.
Where are you?
I'm sorry, I'm goal number 1.
Not on the resolution, but above that?
It's at the bottom of the resolution, but be it further resolved that we adopt the following climate action goals.
All right, I'm there.
Yep.
Got it, thank you.
So I'll just put that out there for consideration by board members. So sorry, Patty, I have a different opinion.
Oh, that's okay. I think measurable is a perfect word, but I think equitably distribute policy impacts covers equitably distribute. But I would like then to find some language so that we include something about that in involving citizens and stakeholders. I mean, if we're going to state, we're not going to, we're not going to leave out the people of different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds. We need to make sure they're included in the process moving forward with outreach and education programs. So, I don't know what words to put in there. Kelly, you're so good at words, so unless the board doesn't feel it's needed in there, I think if we're gonna be equitable, we need to be fairly equitable. Not seeing a lot of board members rallying to that, but I give it a try.
I don't understand your point. What do you mean fairly equitable? Doesn't
Well, I'm saying that
equitable mean fair?
it says in the first bullet point, equitably distribute policy impacts. That means we're gonna equitably distribute policy impacts. And I would like to say something about the citizens we're gonna involve in the stakeholders to make sure that they're equitably represented in the outreach and education programs. It might
In
be
part
redundant,
three.
but I wanna clarify that we're gonna we're gonna keep that door open and be equitably fair in who we bring into the process of determining, outreach and education programs. But I don't have a good choice of words there, so Kelly,
Sure.
you're so good at
Oh,
words.
thanks. I know. I was gonna think maybe for number 3, something to, comprehensively involve, citizens and stakeholders. But I'm not sure if that gets to what you're.
I could easily change it to equitably involve citizens of different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds and stakeholders in outreach and education. A little redundant it might be, but I don't think there's a lot of great harm in reiterating our desire for an equitable distribution of this.
Yeah, I agree. I can leave it in the first if we include something like that in the third, because that's been the whole focus of so many of our discussions outside of this, but that was one of our big discussions at our board retreat was, we're gonna be looking at this equity. And, I think whenever we can make a point of it, we should take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you, Zach.
And then I was gonna also propose that maybe in number 2, we expand who we cooperate with. I'm just thinking about like, how does RAFTA fit into this? How do the utilities fit into this? Who else should be at the table? But
If we make it too specific, though, it may not be as flexible as it needs to be in the future. It might change in the future.
Sure, but now it
So
doesn't
we just-
read,
Doesn't
it
read
reads
generic.
narrowly.
If we have a list, we want to be able to go beyond a list.
I mean, we could
With
say with local
local
jurisdictions,
jurisdictions.
yeah,
Yeah, I think jurisdictions is good, for sure.
and partners, I mean,
I think I think you're right. I think we need to add something that also brings in there the utility companies. We don't need to specify who they are, but I think there needs to be another word for who we're gonna cooperate with. Yes, municipalities or jurisdictions, yes, counties, but we're also gonna cooperate with the providers. So I don't know. I'm looking at you again, Zach.
With local jurisdictions and partners,
Yeah, that's pretty good. Partners works, it's
Yeah.
it's succinct.
it's a little generic.
Well, and municipalities, we don't have, if we say jurisdictions, we don't need to say municipalities and other counties.
Right.
We incorporate both counties and municipalities into jurisdictions, correct?
Right.
yes.
Local jurisdictions and partners.
Come on, Kelly, expand the
Maybe
word.
not
I
very
know,
much.
I mean, I'm thinking more specific, like energy providers or, things like, who do we need at the table here? But I'm okay to be generic, it's fine. We
Yeah,
can
cause it
hammer
could
that
be
out
core, it could be,
in our detailed plan.
yeah.
So if those are the only changes that you would like made, I can get those done and put into the resolution. And then I'll bring it back to the board tomorrow for formal adoption.
And look,
Zach, I would just say maybe not the word local, because there may be the state level that we want to be working with, and there may be lots of funding from the state, there may be federal things that we want to work with, so I'm not sure, we don't want to restrict it to local, so that would be my comment on that second point.
I'm fine with that.
Obviously, we have to work with the local ones, but
Steve?
I don't know.
Sometimes they're harder to work with.
I know, I was gonna say, I guess we have to work with them.
Steve?
Jack, would it be possible to get a red line version for our tomorrow's meeting with anything that's our original resolution from before would be in black, but anything new would be in red, and maybe have a third color for the changes we're making today. Make them green or some other yellow or some other color, perhaps. I don't know if that's possible, but that could help us to really track where the changes are being made and additions being put in and so on.
I think I could easily have that to be presented tomorrow, distributed to all of you, hopefully, but I could definitely have that available for the meeting at the very least.
We were pretty close. I think it's going to take much for us to get it done tomorrow.
And I
Which is
just,
your goal, right, Zach?
I want to confirm, does this give staff what you need to get this work underway? I mean, is this enough?
This is absolutely enough to get underway. If we know, like John said, if we know what the destination is and the timeline to get there, then we can start planning the route that we need to take. And I think this really does help a lot, both with our internal operations inventory and climate action plan, and then for whenever we do begin our public outreach to determine what we need to take. So I think this gives us exactly what we need.
Okay. And then I have a question. Do you, this maybe is probably for Cindy and maybe Ellen too, that is it, I don't know, is there a venturing that any update to the Aspen Area Community Plan would include like a climate focus or a climate objective to it?
Definitely in conversations with the city, I think that they're interested in taking a look at that and looking at the Aspen Area Community Plan through the climate lens. As you know, that's a joint plan, and we'll have to come up with a timing, obviously on that plan, but definitely something that I know they're thinking about.
Okay. Patty.
Cindy, when is that plan due to be updated?
I don't know that it has a due date from the 2012 plan that was the last plan. I can't remember, Ellen, did it have a timeline, like a 5 or 10 year timeline?
I don't think it did.
Yeah.
He has been in conversation with the city, and I know it's on the horizon, but I don't know if they have a specific time frame yet.
I just remember that updating that plan took about 5 years. It was very lengthy and very in-depth and very difficult.
Right. I hope it's not like that again this
I
time.
know, me too, that's what I was thinking.
Francie.
I take it back. I don't need to say anything. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Steve.
When we talk about 90% reduction in emissions, does that factor in that there is an increase in the local production of renewable energy sources? It's sort of a net, I see it as a net 90% reduction, which includes reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and increasing our efficiency and production of renewable electricity and that sort of thing. But that we really don't talk about production of renewable energy here locally in this resolution.
There's about 2,300 kilowatts of renewables in unincorporated Pickens County at this time, and Holy Cross takes that into consideration with its net zero target. When we do that calculation of the emissions from that is a factor that is taken into consideration. So yes, that will be considered in an indirect fashion. It won't be directly called out, but its impacts will be part
And one reason I bring that up right now, just this week we ran into a situation that I wasn't anticipating at all. We want to do solar electricity here at our house, and we found out that we have to pay $5,000 to Holy Cross Energy to help them upgrade the equipment to allow any more houses up in Snowmass and Capitol Creek to be able to put solar electricity on their roofs. Now that $5,000, as more people put solar on, they will have to pay into that, and we would get reimbursed for some of that. But that was something totally out of the blue that I wasn't anticipating, just an added cost to wanting to do the right thing and put solar on our house. So that would be an infrastructure thing, which is mentioned in the third bullet point.
Yeah, and another part of that is that was one of the reasons we did implement the energy storage portion of our land use code is it's actually not the installation of renewables that is the barrier to us achieving net zero of our grid. It's the ability for us to store that energy for peak demand. So that is one of the reasons you run into that at times, but it will be something you have to deal with in the future, and we are in ongoing discussions with Holy Cross Energy to make sure that we can facilitate that process in the future.
I guess I just want to marvel a little bit of like what 29 years ahead is going to look like. You know, and I suppose for people who've been in this community for 29 years, looking back, you know, are we poised? Can we be poised for that drastic change that we need? You know, is the question at hand. So
It's more fun to look back 40 years.
Look back 40 years?
Yeah, to what it was 40 years ago.
You know, for me, the character of our community sustains, right? So there are just some sort of timeless aspects of Pitkin County that sustain. So I sort of envision how do we integrate these achievements into the things that remain static to get us to these reductions. So, you know, that's what sort of the fun exercise I think ahead that will be good.
So if there's concurrence on the changes that you'd like me to make to the goals, I will get you that red line with the green line, I guess. It'll be a multicolored document that we'll present tomorrow for the first reading, for the reading and the adoption of the goals for climate action goals for Pitkin County. If that's okay, then I'll be happy to do an update on our integrated clean energy at the ABC DOLA grant.
Yeah, we have time. Please go ahead.
So, as you might recall, at the end of 2019, we applied to DOLA for a grant. The grant was specifically targeted at clean energy, resiliency, and achieving electrification of facilities by 2040. We came in with a pretty unique proposal to tie public facilities together with a microgrid and heating district system. It's really one of the first of its kind in the country. A lot of airports have been on microgrids, but there hasn't been this reach to intertwine multiple public agencies together in such a fashion. The first part of this was site assessments and identifying conservation measures. This has been completed, and we've created what we call an energy box. So you take the public works facility, the RAFTA Aspen maintenance facility, the airport and Holy Cross substations, and you put a box around them. That's what we're calling the energy box. That takes into consideration their heating load, how much electricity they use, all of the efficiency measures that go into that. So that part is done, and we're currently finalizing that report, which will hopefully be available to you soon. We just had a few little kinks that we had to figure out, such as the airport underpass, which turns out to be a massive energy use. In January, it uses more electricity than the entire airport combined. So it really threw a wrench in. We had to figure out how to deal with it. At this time, we're in what we call Task 4. So at this point, Holy Cross Energy is designing a microgrid system to tie them all together. Just to clarify, a microgrid is a system that has a form of generation and a form of storage, so that if the overall grid goes out, the operation of the facilities that it's tying together can continue. So what they're really doing here is they're designing where the battery systems will go, how big they will be, where that generation of electricity will come from. We have renewables on public works. We have planned and are designing renewables to go onto the RAFTA facility, and then out of the vision process for the airport, that was also something that was identified. And then because we have Holy Cross involved, we're also hoping to tie in that 5 megawatt solar farm that you've approved into it as well, so it kind of be an all interlinked system there. We're also looking at what's called a heating district. So essentially what this does is it transfers excess heat from one facility to another facility so that we don't have to kick on a boiler or something to heat that building, and we can just use what's already been generated by another. As a lot of you know, heating buildings in the winter is incredibly expensive and uses a lot of energy, and it's also pretty climate intensive as well from an emission standpoint. So we're looking to tie in that heating district and the conservation measures in order to reduce the amount of electricity we actually need to use, so that when we put that microgrid system in, it doesn't have to be massive. It can be just what's necessary to keep the buildings running. So we're currently in the design phase for those two. And then we've also begun work on what we call Task 5. So this is really costing out what it'll be to implement it and to maintain these systems, as well as an administrative structure. Having multiple agencies involved like this, we have to make sure that all of them are meeting needs. So when Public Works needs to send out fleets of trucks to go remove snow, they don't have no power on their facility, or RAFTA needs to charge its electric buses, they have access to that electricity, or if the airport needs to communicate to a plane and put lights out, they have reach on that as well. So we're just making sure that everybody's needs are met and how the distribution of electricity will be met between them. And also if Holy Cross wants to discharge all of that stored energy that they have because we don't have a need for it, and that way they don't have to trigger a natural gas power plant or a coal power plant to meet peak demand because we've been storing up our renewable generation. So we're in the last two tasks, Task 4 and Task 5. So that's the design of the new technology, which is microgrid and heating districts, and then the design of the administrative structure and the costing of it. And these are really the exciting ones. But the benefit of the first one, identifying the conservation measures, is that we are doing a design process for the renovation of the Public Works facility. And we're also, as you know, did the whole design for the visioning process for our airport. And so it really took some of the load off to how we can rebuild these campuses and these facilities back to a net zero or a fully electrified component. So we really got a head start on that process out of this process. And then the last thing that we're also looking at is DOLA will have implementation funds for this, but there's also something called a BRIC grant from FEMA. So this is a grant specifically designed at resiliency and that we're 100% eligible for. I believe when I last talked to Matt at FEMA, he said that they had $34 million available last year from this grant and nobody used it. So there's a sizable pot of money to help with the implementation. So we're looking at structuring the final report so that if you guys decide to approve it at the end, we can go straight into the application process for implementation funds for this as well. So that's a real quick overview of what it is, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on it.
Can you tell me the name of the grant again? In the event we talk to our delegation, we can mention it.
It's called the BRIC grant, and Block Resilience. Let me look it up before I give the incorrect name for it. 1 second. If you have another question, I'm happy to answer that while I'm doing this. Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Grant.
Thank you. Other questions, Francie?
So we're at a point where the batteries for storing renewable energy discharge are sufficient to provide that kind of backup for us as a county?
It can provide it really. So using batteries, they have about a 4-hour discharge point. So you can time it up to how they discharge and make it work that way. So they work really well for that period of time. Outages longer than that will need to have them refilled from a generation point. But part of this, we are looking at other forms of energy storage. There's both hydrogen, and then there's also something called flywheels. So there are other technologies out there. I don't know if we're going to recommend an implementation, but we are going to investigate them to see if they're worthwhile to consider.
That's cool. This is a really exciting program that you're talking about. It's really
It's been an awesome project to be involved in. I've gotten a crash course through utility balance, for sure.
really cool.
Other questions for Zach on that? All right, great work, thank you. With that, I think, any last parting words, Cindy or Ellen?
We do have another DELA grant, and that is going to be presented to you on July 6th by the CLEAR and CORE representatives that have been the lead on that project. That's going to identify the solar capacity of the 3-county region.
Cool, thank you.
Interesting. Yeah, I just want to say again to Zach, I'm really blown away by that commuter data that you went through. That was an enormous effort. I'm like, how did he figure out who's driving where and what? But you figured it out, so that's pretty impressive.
And he did it on 3 lines.
Good job.
And I appreciate the collaboration, because that's what it's going to take, right? So, thank you. All right. Well, nice to see you. We'll see you guys tomorrow at first reading.
Bye, guys.
Take care.
Great, thank you.
All right. Review of future agendas.
Yeah, Kelly, thanks. And I really only have one item for you, probably partly because I missed last week's agenda meeting. But the agreement between the SO and the Forest Service on tomorrow's agenda is going to be, the SO has requested that that be pulled. It sounds like they're having discussions on some other options. I don't know the details behind it, but we'll do that during additions and deletions.
It was an emergency resolution, wasn't it?
Yeah, so they're having some other conversation there.
I'm sure that was really important for me to hear, but I couldn't understand a single word of it, I'm sorry to say.
Was it the mask?
I believe it's fast.
So on tomorrow's agenda, there's an emergency resolution, Francie, for a funding agreement between the SO and the Forest Service. And the SO has requested that that be pulled.
So we're not going to talk about it tomorrow.
I thought we needed to have it done by tomorrow so they could get it in.
Yeah, they're having some other conversation. I don't know the details behind it. We got those emails right before coming into this meeting.
Okay.
Other future agendas. Patty?
Yeah, the only thing, and Kelly and I briefly talked about this, is obviously our out agendas, we're going already into July here, are pretty vague right now, so I'm sure we'll be filling them up and cleaning them up as we go along. But so I really don't have anything to comment on, because in some places there's nothing to comment on. So did you do that on purpose, Mr. Peacock?
Well, you might recall there's always a lull before we go into budget.
The storm.
And then your agendas are pretty full.
Thank you.
I do want to note we need to add our meeting with the River District staff from 10 to noon on June 22nd. And then Francie, I do want to point out, I don't know if you saw that the short-term licensing conversation, it's either on the 15th or the 22nd, but that's coming up.
Short-term licensing?
Short-term rental licensing, sorry.
Oh, yeah, short-term rental licensing. Awesome.
Anything else? Anything else on future agendas?
You know, I have a question.
Patty?
You know, we always used to set up joint meetings with other jurisdictions. We're not even Zooming joint meetings with other jurisdictions. Like, we would meet with Lake County and, Gunnison, and we'd try and meet with Garfield, Eagle. So have we thought, maybe that's a discussion we should have at one of our agenda meetings, is if we're gonna see if we can't, see if anybody else is interested.
Yeah, I think that dropped off just last year, actually.
Yeah.
We've been doing it fairly regularly, and actually usually over the summer, because we could drive over to Lake County a lot easier then than
Yeah.
in the winter. So yeah, I think it was really kind of pandemic response and such. We didn't even talk about doing it last year, and yeah, we can
Maybe
certainly
we should,
talk about
Kelly,
reaching
we'll
out.
talk about it and see if there's interest with other jurisdictions, because those discussions it was just great to because, some of them, I don't even know them anymore. And it just had that face-to-face relationship, and in time, and we have a lot of shared issues, and rather than solving them separately, a lot of times we could share our solutions, and it made great sense. We can take those ATVs over from Marble to Gunnison.
Okay, other future agenda items right now? Does the board mind if we take just a few minute break? I have to run to the restroom and then we can come back for open discussion.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so 5 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Grassroots will be back in 5. Okay, welcome back to the Picken County Board of County Commissioners work session. We just had a short break and we're on our final agenda item, which is board open discussion. So I'll look to County Manager John Peacock.
Yeah, a couple items to cover. I think the board is made aware Justin Nyberg declined his appointment to the P&Z. So we're looking for some direction on how to proceed. Really, the options, we had a renewal application with James Vishansi, or the board we could advertise it, continue advertising it as a vacancy. We're looking for some direction if the board's prepared to talk about whether he wants to go out and advertise, or if there's any conversation there that you're ready to have.
That would be my preference, to see if we can recruit a bigger pool of candidates, but let me check in with others. Francie?
I couldn't hear what it is that he started out, that we're going to be advertising about.
I'm sorry, Francie, I must not be talking loud
Are you
enough
tired?
today.
You look a little tired.
Yeah. Justin Nyberg declined the appointment to the planning and zoning.
Okay.
And
Okay, I got it now.
Okay, yeah, just looking for direction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as you said Justin, I knew what you were talking about.
Okay.
So do we want to go back out and open up the solicitation? Or extend it to James, who was the other candidate? Or some third option?
Well, I'm happy just extending it to James, but I know, Kelly, you would like to see more diversity on the board, so if we go out, what's our time frame? How long is it gonna take? We've got big things coming up, and then we have to interview, and we may not get anybody, but if the rest of the board wants to go back out to advertise, I can go along with that, but I'm comfortable either way. I like having James on the board, and I understand the board's decision to appoint Justin, which would have been great. He's a good candidate, but.
But didn't we add a member? Didn't we add an alternate member in order to include Justin?
No.
That was not part of our resolution. I'm not sure if we needed to adopt the bylaws to add an alternate or not. We're able to. It just may require some process. Steve?
So we were going to discuss adding another member. We had not done that yet. And then we were going to go back out, just let James know we were doing that. So at this point in time, I think I would just offer it to James and leave it at that. We might still want to add a new alternate and then go out to advertise that to see if there's anyone else wanting to be an alternate.
I'll just raise my concern again because, I really think P&Z is pretty developer heavy right now, and I'm not sure it's reflective of the community, and it will make our conversations about GMQS even more difficult than I think they're already going to be, particularly based on what I heard today from Randy Gold and how he characterized the issue for ACRA and the community. So I just have concerns about that. So that's why I would like to try and see a board that is more reflective of the community, but that's just my opinion. So, Francie, what do you want to do?
Is there anywhere specific we could look? I mean, are you thinking of a certain segment of our population or a kind of job or something that would help diversify it? What are you picturing?
Well, maybe just some new blood would be helpful. There's some old voices that have been on that board for a long time. I don't know that we'll get new candidates or more candidates.
So I wonder if we should consult with John Ely about making sure whatever step we take that we're doing it properly, given the, the home rule charter and bylaws of the P&Z board and all those things.
I don't understand that, Steve, because we can fill this seat. We can either go back out to advertise for it, or we can accept the candidate that we already interviewed. And I don't think we're talking about adding an alternate at this point. I think we're just trying to fill the seat that's vacant. Or that's now vacant, that wasn't vacant, but now it is.
I think I understand a little bit where Steve's coming. I think he's thinking that we could put on James now, and then we could still try to increase the diversity on the board by having an alternate that might be from a different constituency in the community. And you know, is that kind of what you're thinking, Steve?
Well, what I was concerned about is if we put James in there and then get an outcry from someone in the public saying you did not follow the proper process.
Oh, I see.
Oh, okay.
Now,
I get that.
yeah, so that's why I was thinking just clear it with John Ely. If we're putting James in, I'm fine with that, but I think we should clear it with John first, just to make sure that it doesn't come back on us and get bad PR out of the thing.
Yeah, so Steve, I think there's probably two levels here. One, you all did conduct the interviews, and I think you're able to make that appointment. Whether you should maybe is the question you're asking, and I think if you're concerned that other people would want an opportunity to fill that vacant spot, then probably re-advertising is your best bet.
Okay, I can support that, as long as we make sure that James knows that he still has an opportunity to either come back in a re-interview or be an applicant for that seat for reappointment.
Okay.
So we need to
That's,
get on it, because
yeah.
we need to have this person, interview these people, this seat filled, because we're moving into what could be very lengthy discussions with P&Z, and I'd like to have everybody on board.
Okay, I'm seeing head nod. Steve?
Kelly, one way we could really increase the diversity, not on the P&Z board, but in the process we're going to go through starting later this year, is just to get a wide diversity of people from the community looking at the issues of the house size, the growth management, and the TDRs.
You mean like have a committee or something?
Well, yeah, that's what Cindy's plan is to have a really broad outreach to try to get, a lot of different people involved in the discussions on that, get a lot of public input. I'm sure we're going to hear from the developers and the real estate agents more than any other group, but we might have to go out and try to solicit some people, just ordinary people, homeowners or whoever, who aren't in the industry but who live in our community, to get their input in what our decision's going to be.
Okay. Yeah, I think, and my understanding is that process will be brought to us this fall for our input and approval to take place next year. But that will start being able to give our input on that in just a few short months, because this year is flying by. Okay, John, what else you got?
I just wanted to note that our sheriff has an offer out for any board members who want to do a tour of the jail, or if you wanted to. I think there's a higher comfort level now that our incidence rates are lower. I think a few of you may have already done some tours with Kim and Jody, and that's what would be on the table. So if you are interested, if you could let Charlotte or myself know, and we can get those set up.
It was really helpful that we did it with Jody and Kim. So just so the board knows, Kelly and I did a tour of the historic courthouse and then a tour of the jail. But Francie, I think you've toured the jail, correct?
I have toured it with Jody. It was fantastic.
Yes.
And I have a meeting with Joey tomorrow at 9 o'clock, just to talk about so he can educate me about the sheriff's department.
So we need to get to see if Steve and Greg want to.
Yeah, I definitely would want to have another tour. I went with Don Bird a few years ago, but in the light of, the changes we're talking about, I need to have a new tour now. And maybe Greg and I could go at the same time.
Yeah, and you can really see the issues with nobody in the cells, because you're right in there, so you can see some of the issues very clearly.
I would also just sort of suggest and maybe even assume that if we get a broader stakeholder conversation underway, that could be part of that process too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I did let Joey know that Kelly and I had just toured.
Yeah. I'm gonna go and sit in dispatch one Friday night this summer, or in the command center in the jail, and observe, I think.
Ooh.
Yeah.
She's really getting bored.
I know, I'm like, get me out of my house, get me away from my kids for a night.
You're gonna lock
okay.
your kids in a cell while you're there.
Yeah. What else you got, John?
Bray, hand it back over to you.
Okay. I have a few open discussion things. Do other board members have any topics? Patty?
I have one. I just read in the newspaper about this new early fire detection system that's being totally funded by a local private entity. I just didn't know if the board, maybe I missed it, had a discussion. It's going to be these sensors, or I don't even know what it is, cameras are going to be placed strategically on our communication sites. I just didn't know if we had the opportunity to say who's going to install them, who's going to maintain them, what's the access going to be to the site. I just felt like they're using another asset of the county. I think it's probably a great plan. I just didn't know if it'd been thoroughly vetted to see what the impacts were, because our communications department is already pretty busy. So I just, reading about in the paper and not having any information, I just was reaching out to the board to see if anybody else had been involved in them. So maybe, John, you can get us a little more info?
Yeah, I don't
Since
have
you don't
a lot
even
of
know about
info, either, but typically there's a lease that needs to be done for those tower spaces, which is approved by the board. So I will see what I can find out.
Thank you. Because I think it's something we need to do, and we probably need to do it expeditiously because of the fire season that's year-round, and we're, but I just want to make sure that we have the capacity, if need be, for, in-kind staff. I don't know, so.
Well, and I'm going to follow up, because one of my open discussion items was to follow up on our meeting with the Forest Service and sort of Kevin Warner's challenge to us to be collaborating for the planning of fire mitigation, et cetera. And so, I wanted us to talk about that, whether that is something that our Public Safety Council can do, or whether we need to create a task force to do that type of work. So
I think
throwing it out there.
We have another meeting coming up. We have another work session.
So, so there's a work session coming up with that Valerie's putting together with the fire chiefs, I believe, and sheriff's department to talk about fire mitigation efforts. But I do think it's probably worthwhile for you all to even, I think we could use some direction too, what kind of resources you're willing to put at this. We have a little bit of a chicken and the egg, I think, thing going on. And so to maybe even have a general conversation about, where does this sit for funding priorities and those sorts of things, as well as hearing ideas for mitigation, which was, I think, the challenge coming back. They were going to bring some potential projects that you could respond to.
Yeah, it's on that Tuesday, Kelly, when we were discussing.
Yeah,
I know it was
June 8th.
on the 8th.
But it would be good
sure
to
what you're
know
talking
going into that, maybe, and maybe that's where you're going, Kelly, or.
I mean, I feel like the challenge that we were given is for us electeds, collaboratively across jurisdictions, to work in a fashion to identify where we might want mitigation projects to happen. and that would be sort of the planning basis that the Forest Service and others could start developing mitigation plans around. Was the challenge I heard. So do we want to identify, do we want to say Red Mountain is where we want to focus? Do we want to say our watersheds? Do we want to say our evacuation routes? Like, that was what I heard from Kevin, was getting the leadership to say this is where we would prioritize mitigation to occur.
So, and I heard a similar thing, but I heard a step before that, and so it'd be good to see if who heard what. But
yeah,
the step before that I heard. Can you hear me, Francie? Am I talking loud enough now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you're great. Thank you.
The step I heard before that was that the Forest Service was doing the state of the forest, and that there was also some other risk assessment work that had been done to bring back to the elected officials as a basis to say, here are the areas that science says you should focus on, and then to get a sense where's the low-hanging fruit, where is it easier, where is it going to be more difficult. So and then to really focus on those high priority areas where we could move quickly initially, and then come back. That's kind of, I thought, the process.
I didn't hear
we were
like the
gonna go
pace being the manner in which we would decide.
Well,
but otherwise that lines up.
Let
with
me
what
just
I
add
heard.
though really quick.
Patty and then Francie. Yeah.
We had that map. We had a map that outlined all the hot spots and
Exactly.
which ones, where they were.
we do.
We've had one in the past, and so I'm sure Valerie has it. When we were really discussing the WUI areas, and we did a pilot program at Conundrum on private property, had it all ready to go, and everybody said, no, we're not doing it. Red Mountain doesn't want us to do it. So we were looking at areas that we could actually do that weren't affecting private residences because they were hesitant to be involved. But there was an old map. I don't know when it was dated and if it's been updated, but maybe we can reach out to Valerie and see if she has it, and she's got files of stuff. Because that would get us a big start. Even if it's not updated, it'd still give us some idea as to those hot spots. And it was all kind of, this one's really hot, this one's not as hot, this one's triple hot, so that might be a good idea. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel on that. That's just from old history.
I've seen that map twice. Jim Janung showed it to me when we were talking about fire, and then I saw it, maybe Kevin had it, I can't remember, and it assesses the risk on basically on the value of the property. So it definitely prioritizes structures. But what Kevin said to me when we were touring the fire mitigation up by Swiss Village in the Crystal Valley, I thought what he said was that he wanted us to have a group from the jurisdictions. I thought it was mostly elected people who could work with the communities to let them come into those places, to sort of reach out to the people in the communities to, convince them. He felt like if we approached it a different way, like somebody from Aspen and Snowmass and Pitkin County and Basalt or whatever, went to these particular neighborhoods or homeowners and talked to them about, this is really important that we do this, Forest Service would do it, blah, blah, blah. That's what I thought he was asking us to do.
Well,
maybe that's a little different than what you heard, because that was just one-on-one when we were on that tour, Kelly. So he might have been slightly different.
Well, we have the benefit of going to our recording to rewatch the meeting.
Francie, we did discuss that because I brought up what happened at Conundrum as part of that discussion. That we went out of our way, we went in there and had a plan for every house privately owned in a Conundrum. We picked Conundrum because it was high risk and because most of the people who lived there were locals. We got down to the very end, everybody had a plan, and then they got nervous about their homeowner's insurance and everybody pulled out. And we were there working with them until the very last moment, getting ready to come in there. People literally had tree branches growing down their fire chimneys, and they didn't want anything to be touched. It was so frustrating. But that doesn't say we shouldn't keep trying.
Well, I can just go talk to Kevin. He's right down the road from me. I go by his office all the time and try to clarify what it is he's looking for.
I don't know if he's going to be part of this meeting on the 8th.
Yeah, and I just want clarity, like, is the expectation that we do the work or that we sort of like delegate staff to do the work, you know? Or is there a mix of that, you know, cause I mean, I feel like the public safety groups have a ton of knowledge and stuff anyway, but if we need electeds like serving in a capacity alongside them to move things along, then like, let's set up that structure, you know? So I just, you know, I have outstanding questions. I think that this is a good thing to put momentum around, but, you know, I'm hearing support for that general interest from the board. We just need some clarity on.
Well, I think that's a good question for Valerie.
On what the what is.
It's a good question for Valerie to see what role we can play. And I don't know, I don't necessarily I think Kevin should be aware we're having this meeting. I don't know if he's been invited, but he's been part of the discussion. And it's not that he has to be part of the presentation, but he might want to hear what we're talking about. So should we ask Valerie if
I'll shoot her an email.
if that's going to work for her? And I think Kelly's question is a great question to see because Valerie's the person, she's our point person, so we need to maybe ask her, what can we do, or, you know, what are you doing, and how can we get to where we think we want to go?
And is Kevin coming to that meeting?
And it's Kevin, John's already, I see him making notes over there. Hopefully those, you're taking notes on what we're saying here, John?
I'll never say.
All right, I have a few more items. Are we gonna have a summer picnic? I meant to bring it up during our COVID reopening.
I think.
An all
What kind
employee
of picnic
picnic.
is it, like a public picnic?
No,
or-
it's usually an all employee picnic.
And we give out
We
awards.
I'd like
usually-
to, if
Yeah, we usually
can
do.
you know.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Francie, we usually do employee picnic with some staff recognition for
Time
years of
served.
service and different things. And usually senior staff is out there barbecuing in some fashion and stuff. And I don't see why we couldn't. We didn't do it last year, of course, because of COVID. And there's so much uncertainty about this summer. We haven't planned it yet, but.
Francie, we do it on the lawn by the library.
Yeah, the only hazard I saw was
Nice.
like, if we have everyone in the, you know, all the staff in the building, when normally we don't have all the staff in the building, you know, would be a consideration, but.
We could do it in that new
I'd like to
warehouse at the
recommend we do
landfill.
it.
Their new maintenance
they
barn at the
may.
landfill.
We may not have the participation we normally do if people are uncomfortable.
Let's throw it out there.
Mhm.
Okay, and then, I wanted to check in and see if everybody received an invitation for the CCAT retreat this summer. I don't know if there's interest. I cannot go, cause I'm going on vacation with my kids to go see my family back east and friends. So I'm gonna miss it, unfortunately, but it's a great group, and if anyone's interested, it's gonna be, you know, worthy policy discussion, and they usually have invited speakers on important topics. And so if you're interested, I can forward it along, but I think all of you should be on the membership
Yeah,
list
but
for
would you
CCAT.
resend it to me, please?
Yeah.
Now send it to me too. I do get CCAT things, but I didn't notice if I had gotten that.
Yeah, the meeting's in, Adams County, isn't it? I don't know exactly which part of north side of Denver it sounds like it's gonna be in, but.
And there is a virtual
I'm gonna-
option if you just want to attend a session too.
Yeah. I haven't figured out yet whether I'm gonna try to go in person or just do the virtual one.
But if
When
we,
is it again?
June 24th and 25th. Thursday, Friday.
There's something else on the 25th.
it's my daughter's,
Oh.
well, it's the birthday,
Here's my.
June 25th.
can't go.
No, your brother's and Tracy's.
Alice.
No.
Oh, and Tracy's.
Mm-hmm. So, I have a if more than two of you just decided, we need to let Charlotte know so she can post it.
And then I just wanted to get, Francie, do you want to update quickly on the Mulcahy settlement? Did that vote go through?
Yeah, it
As
went,
expected.
everybody, yes, they supported it, everybody. There was a couple of questions about the timing, about something that might still be at risk if they didn't get resolved at the same time as something else, but Ben said that was not gonna happen and it was all fine, so everybody voted yes.
Thank you.
And I have something.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I applied to be on the Stakeholders Advisory Group for the Wolf Reintroduction Program, and they did select me. I just found out yesterday. The complication is that the meetings are the fourth Tuesday of every month, including June 25th. That thing. I talked to Kelly yesterday, and she said she thought we could work it out. The meetings, I think, are going to start at 9 in the morning, so depending on how they go, I don't know exactly how long they'll go, but I keep our meeting open on Zoom, and you guys can hail me or something.
It's the fourth Tuesday
I would
or
really
the
like
fourth
to serve on
Thursday?
Yeah, I think she got her dates next time.
in that group.
And do you know the duration? Like, how many is it expected for the next
Well,
year?
I'm assuming it's going to
You
be
know?
the rest of this year, because aren't they talking about reintroduction in 2022? So I'm assuming that, but that is just an assumption, and so I'm not sure.
Okay.
And I don't have my official invitation or whatever she said it was that's coming, but she just wanted to get a yes from me yesterday because they wanted to put it in the paper in Denver or something. I don't know. But so I'll know more when I get the official invitation.
Steve?
So Francie, that's terrific. Congratulations. And on the fourth Tuesday, if your meetings are kind of a 3-hour meeting in the morning, perhaps, if we
She
could
thought
arrange,
they might be all day, but
and if that once we find that out, we could not schedule a executive session on the fourth Tuesday morning, if that made it possible for you to be at an executive session later in the afternoon on Tuesday. Let's try to do that to accommodate your
great.
schedule.
they are live meetings. They have Zoom options. They're in different locations on the western slope. The first one's in Glenwood Springs, I think.
Well,
So I could just take my computer and, you know, like Kelly, you could text me or something and say, this is really important. Can you come for a half an hour or something like that?
Sure, yeah.
well, and generally the ACRA meetings coincide with that. ACRA meetings are the last Tuesday of the month, and so some Tuesdays it's the fourth Tuesday. And we already start our meetings later on those days, so most of them will already fit in with what Francie's needs are.
Yep, Francie, I would just
Thank you,
say,
Deb.
you know, we'll take a look at the agenda for that Tuesday as the meetings get scheduled, and then we can identify any hot topics.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks so much,
Yeah,
guys.
congratulations. Patty?
One quick, just to let the board know, I was at the hardware store and ran into a local, longtime local, and there's concern about the parking reservations at Maroon Bells are being bought up in blocks apparently by the hotels. And I don't know if it's also affecting the reservations, because then people go up there somehow and they see all these parking spaces available and they come back down and get really mad at the rangers. Why won't you let me park up here? All these spaces are available. It's because they've already been reserved. So I contacted Kevin about it and just asked him, and he said he hadn't heard that. I actually heard it from somebody associated with one of the rangers. So he was gonna, but just want to give the boards a head up. We've just gotten into the season, and this was one of our concerns about parking reservations and making sure they weren't bought up in blocks, and apparently, well, allegedly, not apparently, but the possibility that that's happening. So Kevin was gonna look into it and then get back to me, and I'll bring the board in the loop when I hear more.
We heard about it at the rafter meeting.
Oh, you did? That people are buying up in blocks? This isn't on the buses, this is the parking passes. It's not the bus permit, the
Yeah,
bus tickets, it's the parking that you can buy up at the Bells itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could be both, probably is. Okay, that's it for me, Kelly.
Oh, I wonder, do we have an update on the Redstone grant request? Is there anything to bring back to us?
Yeah, and I need to pull that up and see if I've got some more information. So I have been in touch, and the Redstone Business Association, which is a nonprofit, has agreed to manage any funds that the board might be inclined to contribute. They upped the request to $15,000 from $10,000, and I'm still kind of digging into that. I think it's to include some one-time costs for web page development, and then they would like to have a $10,000 kind of annual contribution from the county. I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but just from memory, there's somewhere between $3,500 and $4,000 that's coming in through the business association and from businesses. And so they're really looking at marketing and advertising kind of campaigns, magazines, web, flyers, to promote tourism and the business community in Redstone. And so I had asked a few questions before I left town, and I have not seen a response to those yet, but I may have missed them as I'm digging out.
Does Thomasville have any organization like that? I'm just wondering when we're going to be asked by the next group for funding.
I think the answer to that is no.
So this might be a one organization effort.
And so, this is, I think, a role that would typically be taken on by a chamber. That, Redstone doesn't have a chamber. Oftentimes, incorporated municipalities also will support the business community with marketing dollars and such. Of course, Redstone is unincorporated, so I think they're kind of that lack of both of those organizational infrastructures or what is the gap they're trying to fill, and they're coming to us to partner as a municipality.
Well,
right?
And I just hope they understand there could always be unintended consequences of advertising all the good things you have in a community. So then, the next thing we're going to hear is there's too many people in Redstone. What's the county going to do about it?
Yeah, so next Tuesday, if there's time, we can just plan some agenda time, see if Andrea's available.
Yeah.
Also to speak with you, but I do think we're getting a lot of clarity around the structure and such, which is.
I don't really have a problem helping them create a website, but at 10,000 every year, it might be a little redundant on what their efforts are. So I think we need to have better clarification and see what we can do to help them out in some way, possibly.
Okay, any other items?
And then
John?
I'll just give you an update. Got a quick kind of response back on the fire detection equipment. And so it looks like it's coming through the Aspen Fire Department, who's working with a donor. The conversation in the paper may be out ahead a little bit of the rest of the conversation. There's actually a meeting this Friday with the Sheriff's Department and our communications group to give some background on it. So staff will be catching up with it on Friday, and hopefully we'll be able to give you more information next week.
Yeah, I just want to see what the impacts would be to our translator department.
Mm-hmm.
Steve?
I was thinking a little bit about the fire detection, and I know that when they look at satellite view of where lightning strikes are, and in other dry summers, the fire department is going around and checking wherever a lightning strike shows up on the satellite. They go on the ground and inspect that area, but maybe there is satellite technology that detects hot spots where there might be a fire started or something too. That would be worth them looking into.
Steve, I think you're right. I think there already is. I think we have a system already in place. I can't remember which fire meeting I was attending, and there was somebody there explaining the system that's already there. So I don't know how this differs from that. And they use satellite. It's incredible what they can see with satellites. And they monitor areas, especially when they see the weather moving through, to see if there's any hot spots that show up before or after during a storm. So that's a good question to ask if it comes back to us and say, how does this compare to what we believe is already out there with using satellites rather than just cameras that are mounted locally. But good question, Steve.
Okay, any other open discussion items? All right, thank you all. We'll see you at noon tomorrow for our regular work session. Thank you guys. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Skylar, for helping
Thanks,
us on
guys.
Zoom today.
Yeah,
And
good to
thank
see
you,
ya.
Grassroots.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye guys.
Bye. Where's my lady?